The events take place in the office of an ophthalmologist, the first central hospital of Yuanhai City. Dr. Zhao looks at his patient with contempt, finding an error in the document, so he asks him to once again describe the symptoms with which he came in. The main character, Zhang Yu, complains about his eyesight. His eyes do not see as clearly as before, and when looking at an object, a red stripe with the number 18 appears. He assumes that this is the doctor's age, which is why he comes into culture shock and asks the boy if he drank alcohol before. There is no direct answer, so Zhao decides not to ask any more questions and begins to conduct an inspection during which he does not notice anything unusual. Having not achieved certain results, Zhang Yu leaves the doctor's office. In the corridor, he sees above each person those same red stripes that have different percentages. Rejoicing that at least the conjunctivitis has been cured, the boy thoughtfully goes out, hoping to find a useful use for his peculiarity. On the street, news was heard from everywhere that the Night Watch Department was going to open a new set of candidates for patrolling the streets at night. Deciding to take a good look around before returning home, Zhang Yu was ready to move on, but the untied lace on his sneaker didn't think so. The boy bent down to tie it when he suddenly felt a strange energy behind him, spreading around him. Having found the strength to straighten up and look up, he saw a green sun in the sky, illuminating the city with the same color. Suddenly, a girl with blades and glowing eyes slipped behind him. She rushed towards the demon floating in the air. Above both of them, Zhang Yu saw red streaks with blood, and the girl's percentage was clearly dominant. Having looked around, the guy discovered chaos around him. The city was filled with various creatures and monsters, and they were opposed by young people with swords and blades, having a very different percentage in the strip. There was also such a stripe above the sun, and the number on it was very awe-inspiring. It seemed that it was a boss that needed to be defeated, and all the little creatures would fall. But the boy couldn't think of anything better than to start panicking. Unexpectedly, he regains consciousness in the same place where he initially felt this strange energy, at a pedestrian crossing. Everything around him looked ordinary and everyday, as if it all happened only in his head. Zhang Yu slowly begins to doubt the safety of the city, no matter how reliable the night patrol unit is for the civilian population. He believes that this is all an elaborate lie to reassure people. Suddenly they grab him by the shoulder, offering to buy medicine, assuring him that they are exactly the same as the official ones. The guy reproaches the merchant for his activities and even demands to give him one of the jars for free, but he turns around and leaves, realizing that he will not take the bait. But as it turned out, he took the bait, and Zhang Yu bought the so-called divine oil from him. Returning home on the bus, the boy could not believe that he had bought oil for 3,000, so he mentally asked the merchant not to blame him if he reported him to the police. After some time, the driver's voice was heard announcing an imminent stop on Yuzhnaya Street. The guy was preparing to leave, and it seemed that nothing was foreshadowing trouble. But he clearly saw his reflection in the window and again felt the energy that quickly began to envelop him. However, she also quickly disappeared, leaving Zhang Yu looking around in confusion. He was seriously scared, because this happened for the second time that day. It was getting close to dusk, so it was worth returning home as soon as possible. Upon arrival, Zhang Yu managed to take a shower and get out of it, shaking off his wet hair. Looking at himself in the mirror, the guy was frightened by the pattern that appeared on his chest. He remembered that he had already seen something like this, it seemed, in one of the comics. But it was not possible to go deeper into the memories. The pattern began to emit a green color, similar to the one it was this afternoon. From the burning pain all over his body, Zhang Yu fell to his knees directly on the tiles in the bathroom. Somehow, reaching for the shower, he turned on the cold water and directed it towards himself, immediately feeling relief. And then, in the reflection of the mirror, he saw a bloody stripe, only now above his head, and the number on it was very calming, 100%. But the strangeness did not end there. A black stripe, similar to a shadow, began to slip away from under his feet. The boy was seriously scared, trying to find his own shadow, which for some reason was not displayed anywhere. Still, having found the reflection on the wall of the tile, he exhaled and even laughed at this situation, thinking that after everything that happened during the day, he would not be surprised even at her disappearance. Having finished with the water procedures, Zhang Yu headed out, and as soon as he opened the doors, he saw in front of him a black silhouette that was an exact copy of him. It was a shadow, it looked frightening, and it was clearly hostile. When looking at her, the boy's heart began to burn, and this unknown green energy seeped out from the symbol on his chest again, bringing hellish pain. In any case, there was two news. The good news was that the shadow had not disappeared. The bad news was that it was alive. Fortunately, I didn't have to fight with her because she turned out to be friendly. Having gotten to know her better, Zhang Yu tested her in every possible way, asking her to raise either her left arm or her right leg. And the shadow obediently followed all the orders given by its owner. The boy could hardly contain his laughter looking at all this, and at some point ordered her to dance. She, of course, fulfilled his wish, which is why he grabbed his head, feeling a piercing pain in the back of his head. He sincerely did not understand where it came from and what to do with it next. Unexpectedly for himself, he saw and felt a glow on his chest, where there was a sign that had previously only brought him trouble. It rose into the air and began to spin sharply, as if it was about to explode. But everything worked out, and a hologram appeared in front of Zhang Yu, on which a sign was displayed with the characteristics of his shadow. From the description, he learned that the shadow exists thanks to him, and that it also has the same memories and strength and can perform simple tasks, but it has no consciousness. Out of interest, the guy stuck his hand through the shadow, realizing that its abilities were somewhat limited. He clarified whether she definitely had all his memories, to which she nodded in agreement. The boy immediately rushed to his desk, trying to find something. Having found a sheet with an equation, he handed the pen to the shadow and asked him to solve it. Surprisingly, the shadow was able to hold such a thing as a pen, which the guy was surprised by, starting to jokingly ruffle her hair, not believing what was happening. Not even 5 seconds had passed when the shadow turned around, showing a piece of paper with the inscription, "Decided." Zhang Yu couldn't understand why she didn't solve the equation, but just wrote a phrase, because the shadow has all the memories. So he got angry, snatching the piece of paper. He suggested that the task was very difficult, so he asked her to draw a horse. The shadow coped with this task quickly and perfectly, so a business plan for writing books with the help of the shadow unobtrusively popped into the boy's head. However, before that it was worth testing its other capabilities, and the next skill in line was Shadow Bite. Zhang Yu did not immediately understand what was being said, referring to this skill, but after guessing something, he moved towards the thing that cast at least the slightest shadow. Put it forward in your hands. The guy tried to absorb it, but, unfortunately, his guesses were not justified. The third skill was the shadow pupil, with the help of which he could see with his eyes the dark side of this world, and this is exactly what he had already experienced a couple of times. The boy tried to concentrate again on his own and look at the dark side, but he failed. Therefore, he turned to the shadow, which all this time continued to draw fascinatingly, distracting it and asking it to do push-ups. She rose from her place and began to slowly disintegrate, seeping through the floor. Zhang Yu did not understand what was happening and where she was going, so he anxiously tried to call her back, but was tactfully ignored. The boy seriously panicked, looking around, trying to call again and again, but there was still no answer. Out of nowhere, a dark clot appeared in the middle of the room, which turned into a portal, and from there the shadow still deigned to show its face. Zhang Yu somewhat irritably asked where she was running, and the shadow, not having the physical ability to speak, answered in writing. As it turned out, she was on the dark side and carried out her master's orders. She did push-ups. The guy came to the conclusion that perhaps the training on the other side was better, so he sent her back without any more questions. When there was no trace left of the shadow, he hurried to sit down at his workplace and, taking a pen in his hand, got down to business. It is unknown how much time Zhang Yu spent on carrying out the plan. One thing was known. The sun had been shining outside for a long time and the birds were singing with all their might. While our hero was sleeping soundly on his desk, drooling on the tablet under his head, he dreamed of his mother's friends, the fitness trainer, and even his classmate Xiaozhu. And it seems that in the dream they were so ardent that the guy did not have time to draw them. The boy was torn from his sleep by the alarm clock, which rang sharply as scheduled. He was clearly not delighted with it, and even more was not delighted with the position in which he slept. So he hurried to straighten up and crunch his back, stretching it. They persistently pounded on the door, and Jiang Yu lazily but still opened it, meeting his childhood sweetheart on the threshold, Lu Yao Yao. He noticed that her blood scale was only 93% and was already worried. But then he remembered and pushed everything back to those very days. The girl, without ceremony, entered the room, engrossed in her phone. The guy was not happy about this, but Lu Yao Yao justified herself by saying that she was terribly interested in hearing about the business that he talked about yesterday, but didn't tell. She flinched from the unexpectedly loud slam of the door and almost dropped her phone. Not fully understanding why she was treated this way, the girl began accusing the boy of saying that if he didn't want to tell, he would have said so instead of slamming the door. But the clap was so strong that cracks appeared along the wall. Jiang Yu himself was shocked by what happened. He drew attention to his arms, which had become pumped up and therefore more powerful, although they had never been that way. Even Lu Yao Yao was shocked by what she saw and couldn't believe her eyes. She was sure that he would rather die than start studying. And where such muscles will appear overnight is also unclear. Poking her finger into his hand with some interest, the girl immediately came closer and addressed the boy with a claim, intending to get an answer to her question. Jiang Yu began to make excuses that he had only done a few exercises, although he mentally understood that this seemed to be the result of training the shadow that was being displayed on him. The girl lifted his t-shirt, seeing his beautiful abs in front of her, and called the boy a liar because it is impossible to pump up so many cubes in a few exercises. She began to involuntarily suspect him of being involved in illegal activities and urged him to stop before it was too late. The guy asked her to shut up and not blame him for something he didn't do, but Lu Yao Yao didn't listen to him and grabbed his hand, twisting it behind his back. She put a detector bracelet on it, a device for determining the pollution index. She also explained that murders, foreign objects and insults are all part of pollution. And if everything is not eliminated in time, accumulations threaten to degenerate and alienate people. The boy was sure that the detector would not work because his abilities were controlled straight from his chest. But the numbers on the detector began to increase sharply, and the girl immediately suspected something was wrong, pulling out a pistol. The guy panicked and tried to prevent everything, and surprisingly, he succeeded. The value began to decrease. He laughed awkwardly, and Lu Yao Yao calmed down, twirling the gun on her finger and noting that nothing like that was happening to her friend. She also explained that her father taught her to be careful in everything, so she had to take such measures. Jiang Yu decided to change the subject by inviting his friend to look at some of his new drawings, and she, of course, immediately agreed. Time flew by, and when the boy escorted the girl out of the room, he fell on the bed, sighing heavily. Having opened the hologram in front of him, he learned that the shadow had been training all night on his own orders, which is why he was left in a slight precipitate. Rising from the bed, Jiang Yu put his hand forward, calling the shadow back to the human world. As soon as she appeared in front, he immediately praised her and said that push-ups alone were not enough, so they needed to increase the complexity and intensity of the training. The shadow nodded his head in agreement, and the boy immediately began to give instructions. Take a prone position, do a plank, and whatever came to his mind. With each exercise, he increased the complexity. Some even reached the point of absurdity. But the shadow performed everything with ease. The guy voiced it all so loudly that the girl, who decided to stay outside his door and eavesdrop on what he was doing there, came to the conclusion that it seemed like he was really training, and she had simply thought too much of herself. Now she felt calmer because everything was fine with her friend. So she hurried to go to her home in order to start reading the comic. It was the 20th of January. It was the first day since the shadow appeared. After her training, Jiang Yu did not experience any painful sensations, but only became stronger. And, of course, this completely satisfied him. On the second day, January 21st, he gave the shadow many more different exercises, and the result from them was not long in coming. It was visible on the face. The boy even dreamed that now he must be able to defeat Lu Yao with one blow, although he came to the conclusion that it was still early and he needed to continue to try harder. Grandfather Li, who worked on the night watch, also came today, so he couldn't be allowed to suspect anything. Time passed quickly, the dates on the calendar changed, and Jiang Yu was satisfied with the shadow training while he himself went about his business at that time, getting results. On the 26th of January, the boy tried to do 10 push-ups, but nothing really worked out for him. Looking into the hologram, he discovered that he had a very slow rate of gaining shadow points. During the entire time, he had accumulated only 8 of them. Judging by the current progress, it was difficult to get 10 points for evolution, so the guy assumed that he could increase their growth if he went to the dark world. Deciding not to waste time, he immediately put the force into practice, setting off for his destination. Finding himself in his own room, Jung Yu was surprised that after his trip nothing, however, had changed except the lighting. Going out into the street, he saw the same city in front of him, only in dark colours. True, leaving my own room turned out to be quite a task. The door did not want to give in. Walking along the roadway, the guy finally realised that you can only get into the dark world by leaving the real one. Suddenly, there was a noise and a sudden movement behind him. Jung Yu was already happy that it was his shadow, but how wrong he was. It was a huge creature with a scythe instead of arms and teeth like sharp thorns. She swung at the boy, intending to finish him off. Shocked by what he saw, somehow he was able to dodge. The scythe hit the ground without even touching him. The real game of survival began. Jung Yu clumsily dodged all the blows, which each time angered the unknown creature more and more. Unable to bear it, the guy activated the shadow's pupil and immediately slipped through the portal that appeared back into the real world. Plopping face first onto the cold floor, he got down on all fours and tried to catch his breath. Finding that his ass was cold, the boy turned around and realized that the creature had managed to tear off a piece of his pants, exposing his butt. Having risen to his feet, Jung Yu still could not understand where she had come from and why she had attacked him. Having examined himself, the guy noted only a few abrasions on his hands and was glad that his training had made him stronger, because that's why he managed to dodge. Fired with excitement, the boy grabbed a metal folding chair from his room and returned to the dark side of the world. On January 28th, he fought the entity for the first time and, unfortunately, lost. On the 29th of January in a rematch, Jung Yu failed the test again, receiving a strong blow to the chest that almost broke his bones. On January 30th, 3 bloody marks appeared on his buttocks. And although it had been difficult over the past few days, he still managed to restore 6% of his blood. On January 31st, the guy decided to stay home and regain his strength. Lu Yao Yao asked her friend where he managed to get so many abrasions, but the boy only replied that scars adorn men. Laughing at this statement, she sharply treated the scars on someone else's ass, causing him to scream quietly. When the girl finished this little torment, Jung Yu put on his pants and turned around, wondering what plans she had before the exam, which would take place in a month. During the years of disaster, most industries became less popular, including the cultural and arts industries. People involved in art became the lower classes of society, and no one cared about entertainment and celebrations anymore. The battles that take first place in people's hearts come first. To become part of the Night Watch, you need to pass a martial arts exam, after which your life changes dramatically. Lu Yao Yao admitted that she doesn't want to participate in this and is actually attracted to the music. Jung Yu tried to encourage the girl that this is her life and she can do whatever she wants. However, the only obstacle was the father, who would definitely be against this, to which the guy gave arguments that could play into her hands. The girl was sure that he would not agree, so she asked her friend not to tell anyone about this conversation. Lu Yao Yao explained that the pressure on the Night Watch is constantly increasing, so almost everyone is accepted, and she will definitely pass the exam. The guy remembered that on the day of the exam, a lot of different devices are used, and if there are pistols, he will definitely fail it. He was afraid that after this they might send him to some correctional camp, where they would find out about his abilities. Suddenly, Jiang Yu asked his friend if he could use her detector. As it turned out, this device can only be used to detect others, and if he, for example, encounters one of them, it is best to run away or call emergency services before he is killed by the special one. The boy interrupted her, wondering who these special people were, but instead of an answer, there was awkward silence, which the girl hastened to interrupt by saying that since she was done with his sores, it means she can return to her home. But the guy did not deviate from his own. He continued to be interested because her family knows a lot about others. Lu Yao Yao came to the conclusion that if he was so interested in special people, then he was planning to take the exam after all. The guy reminded that this year they must take an exam in martial arts. If only the person taking the test had the ability. The girl suddenly rushed at her friend, not believing what she heard. And, as it turned out, he also plans to create several comics about others and special people. After this, the guy had to tell an ardent comic book fan for a long time about the plot. Invented on the fly. After long conversations, Lu Yao Yao called Zhang Yu to her apartment, which was located in the same building on the same floor. The girl asked him to sit in her room while she went to her father's room and brought what she needed. Looking around, the boy noticed a comic book on the bed, the plot of which revolved around the love of a brother and sister. He jokingly began to reproach his friend for reading such things, but she abruptly snatched the comic from someone else's hands and, in her defense, said that her friend simply forgot to pick it up. Ordering Zhang Yu to sit in the chair and not touch anything else, the girl disappeared behind the door. Once again looking at all sorts of things in the girl's room, the boy drew attention to the guitar. Yao Yao once constantly pestered them to listen to music together, although he did not particularly like this. Reaching for the tape recorder, the guy inserted one of the cassettes and turned on the music, plunging even further into pleasant memories from childhood. When the girl returned, she couldn't believe her eyes. She immediately rushed to her friend and asked when he started liking music. But without giving time to think and answer, Lu Yao Yao handed the boy virtual reality glasses and asked him to put them on. Immediately, Zhang Yu obeyed the instructions and put on his glasses, awaiting further action. Not even a minute had passed before the guy failed into the virtual world, which it seems almost caused him to vomit. Focusing, he discovered in front of him an unexplored space called Shenzhou, which is considered the original source of the cataclysm. Others appeared in it, committed brutal murders, destroyed, and gradually absorbed the world. Between the real world and the world of Shenzhou, there is a space called the Dark World, displaying a projection of the real world. As soon as the space was opened, the monsters immediately entered the world through the dark. And although to this day the Night Watch continues to control the gaps, sometimes others still break through the defenses. The layer of shadows is reset every 3 months, redisplaying the current picture of the world. And during this period, others penetrate into the real world. After listening to the information, Zhang Yu was somewhat surprised that there were also impurities in the layer, although he did not feel any discomfort when he went there before. Suddenly, a huge something resembling a person appeared behind him. It swung at the boy, but the next moment it was burned by an unknown force that crashed down on him from heaven. The flash in the sky became even brighter, and all the monsters that were nearby ran away, while Zhang Yu tried to take a look at what it was. To cope with monsters, you need to be able to fully control your powers. This was the special one he so wanted to know about. The guy was clearly delighted with what he saw, and even managed to think that when he passed the exam, he would also become special. But the special ones are others with a human body who control their power, but at the same time die because of it. Special people constantly struggle with pollution and alienation, and after death, they have a high probability of becoming different. Therefore, special people, when they realize that death will soon come for them, try with all their might to use up the remnants of their strength. Before leaving virtual reality, Zhang Yu witnessed how someone special turns into something else, from beautiful to terrible, which will only bring destruction in its wake. The boy was delighted with what he saw, and Lu Yao Yao asked how it was, to which he complained that the amount of information was too much and it would take time to digest everything. Taking this opportunity, the guy asked to stretch his shoulders, but the girl was not happy with what she heard, to which he himself offered 3 original paintings, the content of which she could choose herself. It was a very profitable deal, so within a moment, Lu Yao Yao's hands were on someone else's shoulders. Zhang Yu complained that his neck was stiff after constant training, and when it came to his abs, he offered to touch them. Well, the girl didn't refuse. She lifted up someone else's t-shirt and examined the cubes, after which she touched them. Only now, Uncle Lu, who suddenly appeared in the doorway, was clearly not happy with what he saw. As the trio moved into the kitchen, a tense silence fell between them, interrupted by Zhang Yu's chewing. The guy saw how annoyed Lu was, so he couldn't say anything, so as not to escalate the situation even more. But then Lu Yao Yao intervened, assuring her father that he had misunderstood everything. True, it didn't quite work, because Lu began to reproach his daughter for the fact that his eyes clearly did not deceive him. Deciding to still vote, Zhang Yu picked up a glass of yellow liquid and said that he would drink 3 of these as punishment. In the uncle's opinion, he allowed himself too much and seemed quite impudent towards the elder, so Lu abruptly stood up from his seat, intending to teach the boy a lesson. Zhongyu and Yao Yao are childhood friends whose personalities are completely different. He is a bully boy, she is a diligent daughter. Since childhood, the girl liked to play with Zhongyu, no matter what terrible things he did. Maybe it's all because the boy once helped her by defending other bullies. And besides, she could have been attracted by his beauty and courage. Lu Yao Yao accompanied her friend even when he pretended to be a tramp, not to mention other adventures. Uncle Lu never allowed his daughter to get too close to him, constantly being wary of the boy. And even now, when the minor misunderstanding had seemingly been resolved, the uncle continued to frown as he interrogated Zhang Yu about what he was doing with his daughter when he returned. Frightened, the guy blurted out that they were looking at information about others and special ones, but this information, at first glance, also did not impress Lu. However, after a few seconds, the muscles on his face relaxed and the man even smiled. After which he became serious again, asking the boy if he knew why the government did not allow students to learn about such details in advance. As it turned out, Zhang Yu did not know, so his uncle explained to him that certain things should not be known to everyone due to the fact that everyone has different hearts and desperation may attract people from Shenzhou. Not everyone has enough willpower, and if a gap forms in the heart, someone else can penetrate it at any moment. Therefore, various tests are carried out before the exam, and only people with appropriate physical preparation can come into contact with the world of others. Unfortunately, even with today's medical abilities, some people still get out of control. After hearing this, Jiang Yu tried to convince Lu that he could not miss the exam this year. Besides, the boy had already understood everything a long time ago, and there was nothing to worry about. The man was not particularly pleased with the guy's decision and was about to object when the phone rang. Lu was notified that there was an urgent mission regarding the shadow. So, without wasting a second of time, he rose from his seat, heading towards the exit. Before leaving the apartment, the uncle turned around and warned the guy that it was better not to upset him. And then he would take him to the patrol unit. Putting his hand on his heart, Zhang Yu swore that they would not do anything like that with Lu Yao Yao. However, the girl herself was somewhat shocked by what she heard. She immediately grabbed the boy by the cheeks, exclaiming indignantly that they had never done anything like that, and he grabbed her in response, only as a joke. It was getting late in the evening, the streets were crowded with people and noise and commotion could be heard from all corners. But only Zhang Yu, who left the apartment and headed to the grocery store, was not delighted with the information he ultimately received. He did not learn anything new. The guy understood that after this prank, Uncle Lu would most likely hide these materials and he would never see them again. Somewhat upset, the boy continued to put goods in the basket when the phone rang. It was Lu Yao Yao, who asked to buy a carton of eggs, a carton of milk and something else, which in the end she decided not to voice, immediately hanging up. Zhang Yu was not a stupid guy and understood that his friend wanted to ask him to buy her pads, but was embarrassed. This product did not bother him at all, so he grabbed 2 packages and headed to the checkout. Walking down the street with a full bag of all sorts of things, the boy thought that shadow training alone was not enough, therefore it would be worth adding real ones. Thoughts came one after another, and now Jiang Yu noticed to himself that the propaganda about fighting the others had intensified, as a result of which many more people signed up for the exam than expected. Stopping, he looked at the sky, where the moon was slowly being covered with black clouds. There was a feeling in his soul as if something terrible was about to happen. Deciding to take a break from his obsessive thoughts, he began to twirl his free hand, stretching it. Suddenly, something disturbed him. And hastily looking around, the guy moved away from the crowded street into a less quiet alley. Using his newly acquired skill, Jiang Yu moved from the real world to the dark world. Seeing a bloody stripe with a very low indicator, 14% blood, the boy prepared to attack, taking a fighting stance. He looked into the dark corner in front of him, from which terrible sounds were coming. And imagine his surprise when he managed to see him as a guy in a uniform that was covered in numerous holes and blood. When he came closer, Zhang Yu saw empty eyes, in which the irises were filled with purple, without the slightest hint of a pupil, and the face showed small cracks from the massacre. The boy recognized the poor fellow as his neighbor, who lives in the same house with him, and was surprised to see him here. The wounded man, staggering, fell on the asphalt right in front of Jiang Yu, causing him to freeze in place, not knowing what to do. The guy looked at the strip of blood and realized that he was on the brink of death. In the same nook from which the stranger came out, two children were sitting, hugging each other. It seemed that he was protecting them. Suddenly, a red something began to appear, terrible and reeking of cold, but not as strong as before, having only 24% of the blood in it. Jiang Yu recognized his opponent in another. It was him who he had tried to defeat earlier, but could not having the proper skills for battles. Now everything was different. A few hours earlier, a young night watch worker was returning from his shift late at night, complaining to the corporation about the heavy workload. As a civilian, he thought this job was respectable, but he ended up working overtime all the time. Suddenly, he was distracted from his whining by the heart-rending scream of children coming from the alley. They asked to help them, to save them, while the black shadow of another enveloped the bodies more and more, sucking the poor people into the dark world. The guy panicked, not understanding what was happening. He had never seen people so publicly drawn to the dark side. Not daring to give in to emotions, he rushed off in order to save the children. Grabbing their hands, the guy tried to pull the guys out, but in the end, he himself was dragged in after them. The breach spat out all three of them where they shouldn't be. The children immediately began to cry, calling for their mother, and the inexperienced specialist tried to recover from what had happened. But he couldn't. He panicked again, filling his head with unnecessary thoughts. Since the guy had worked his shift, he didn't even have a weapon, which made the situation much more complicated. Another took advantage of people's absent-mindedness and swung his hand in order to get what he wanted. The night watch worker managed to react, repelling the monster's attack and then repelling part of his hand, which fell next to the children. This bought some time, so the guy began to look around. The gap has disappeared, which means it will not be possible to return. He understood that others were everywhere and could attack at any moment. But the most terrible thing in all this were the helpless children who cried incessantly. All my guy can do at the moment is send a distress signal and wait for rescue. After the signal was sent, he gave the detector bracelet to the guys, explaining to them that it would help temporarily counteract the local pollution. In fact, their survival depended directly on fate. But, fortunately, this did not last long, but it calmed them down. The guy asked to stay close to the children, promising them that he would return them home as soon as he deals with one small problem in the form of an angry other. When the guy was 18, he passed the martial arts exam and entered the martial arts department at the university at the department. From the very beginning, he worked hard, thereby laying a solid foundation, and waited until he became a full-fledged fighter. In his second year of study, the guy took first place in the exam for fighting with others. But this turned out to be not enough, since in the other world, diligence is far from the first place. He never believed in fate, but no matter how hard he tried, he still could not overcome the barrier and step over his limit. In the end, all he had to do was transfer from the martial arts department to the humanitarian department, becoming an ordinary civilian employee of the night watch. Getting ready to fight, the guy warmed up a little and assessed his opponent and the situation as a whole. Another was in the form of a half-man, moving on all fours. It seemed to be average. The monster rushed into battle swinging at the man, but he was able to repel the attack, although it was difficult. Then, the guy hit back right in the other's face, causing him to howl and fly a little to the side. What he had done took his breath away, and he was even glad that a familiar feeling was returning to him. But as soon as he lost his vigilance for a split second, the monster swung again and hit him straight in the chest, throwing him into the wall, along which small cracks appeared. Mentally scolding himself for the mistake, the guy managed to dodge the next attack. And from the next three too, although with each such movement it became harder and harder. Running was no longer possible, so something had to be done. Using the power of the shadow blinding, he managed to stop the other one for a while. How long it will be possible to contain the monster is another question. Another howled in pain and fell immobilized to the ground, which means the guy bought himself some time. As he exhaled, he discovered that the pollution level had begun to rise. This is because every time someone uses their skills, pollution increases. Low-skilled people like him cannot use their abilities repeatedly. But fortunately, since he didn't use them very often, the pollution was still at a low level. However, if the guy doesn't take risks and doesn't do anything now, there may be no future. When the other one recovered a little and rushed at the guy again, the second one tried to use his skill again. But instead, he only received a deafening blow to the stomach, from which he rolled head over heels on the asphalt. Coughing up blood, he was even somewhat envious of the other, who had adapted to his skills so quickly. True, he had only an average level, and any student from the combat department would have dealt with him in an instant. But the guy had a hard time because of the difference in talents. Even if you can't win, you can't retreat. The only thing he can do is stall for time and wait until other members of the Night Watch arrive. The children watched in horror the bloody battle where the man was clearly beginning to lose, continuing to receive numerous wounds throughout his body. Instantly, another threw the guy to the ground with all his might, as a result of which he gradually began to lose consciousness. He thought that he was dying, and pictures from the past began to emerge before the eyes of death. When he was 15, his entire family was killed by others. Therefore, at 18, the boy decided to take a martial arts test. At the age of 20, he was expelled from his second year, and at 21, he entered the Night Watch unit as a civilian. 4 years have passed since then. This was his life. It may not seem easy, but for this world, it is considered the norm. For 100 years of people struggle with others, they have never lived in peace. But sometimes, even others retreat. Death is the norm in their case, but before death, the guy must do something. Having found the strength to rise to his feet, he took all his will into his fist and announced the second round to the monster, being ready to give another fight. Gathering all his power, the guy rushed at the other, but he didn't let him get close. He began to swing away with his hands, which looked like sharp blades. But it was almost impossible to dismiss everything. The young man revealed a vulnerability and kicked the monster right in the face. This briefly discouraged him and gave the boy time to accumulate the remaining energy in his hands, which he immediately directed at someone else, delivering many blows at the same time. He needed to be stronger and not stop. But his eyes began to darken treacherously and his body weakened. At the end of the race, he collapsed on the asphalt from a powerful blow to the head, which made him fly several meters back. Still, the guy's skills were not enough. And even with the help of pills, it was not possible to win. He was a weakling whose life was gradually slipping away from under his feet. Our main character, Jung Yu, appeared out of nowhere, and the guy couldn't even imagine where he came from. However, it didn't matter, because he could trust the stranger who asked him to rest and rely on him for the rest. Jung Yu was already impatient to flex his fists, but he miscalculated a little and was the first to get hit in the face by someone else, and not vice versa. The battered Night Watch worker was shocked at what a weakling his saviour was and had already lost all hope of salvation, and also almost managed to miss a blow from another aimed at himself. Fortunately, Jung Yu managed to fight him off and remind the monster that now he is his opponent, and not the almost dying little man nearby. The boy's weapon in the battle against others was a soy sauce bottle. And it was quite effective. He swung it and hit it with all his might in the monster's face, after which it shattered into pieces, leaving behind only a prickly neck. This was even many times better, because this way it was possible to inflict even more piercing blows on someone else, making him howl in pain. Jung Yu had a clear advantage in that the other had lost a lot of blood and was exhausted, and the guy had also managed to learn all of his techniques when he fought with him earlier. The Night Watch worker watching the battle was a little shocked that this method of fighting worked. However, there are no rules as such, so there was no difference. By this time, the boy was already pretty tired of beating around the bush, so he decided to finish by threatening the monster that now it was his turn to kick his ass. True, he believed in himself too much and did not calculate that someone else could fight back by kicking him in the stomach with his tail, which sent the guy flying against the wall. Jung Yu began to understand that all this was no longer a joke and something more serious needed to be done. Returning home was not an option, then those three would die, and he did not want that outcome. You can't be cowardly, especially when the enemy has only 20% of his blood left, because he's almost dead. The guy from the Night Watch arrived on time as never before with his advice, namely to hit the right rib, which already had a serious injury. Realizing what had to be done, Jung Yu took off like lightning, overtaking his opponent in an instant. Before hitting the vulnerable spot, the boy confused the other, moving from side to side. And he succeeded. He opened up, conveniently exposing himself and immediately receiving what he deserved. At first it seemed that the other was running away from the battlefield, but no. He rushed to the defenseless children to drink their blood and restore his own. He needed this in order to have the strength to fight further. It felt like just a moment before he would take the lives of innocents. Another opened his mouth, which made his appearance even more terrifying. The little girl seemed to lose consciousness and lost consciousness. The little boy held her in his arms, unable to take his eyes off the terrible teeth that would stick into him in the next moment. Zhang Yu couldn't let this happen, so he took out a can of energy drink from the bag and threw it straight at the monster. She flew, but it was unlikely to distract, much less cause any harm to anyone else. Therefore, a night watch worker intervened, using the last of his strength to rush at the creature and kick him in the ribs. The other flew away, but the guy also lost a little blood, and now his scales showed 15% instead of 18%. He weakened even more and now could barely move, thanks to which the monster switched to him, intending to devour him. Fortunately, Zhang Yu arrived just in time, grabbing him by the face and preventing him from realizing his plan. The boy literally grabbed him, not allowing him to move. Then he pressed him into the asphalt, delivering a series of blows to his back, causing one to squeal like a bitten dog. He was also rapidly losing blood and was already on the verge of death. Suddenly, Zhang Yu discovered the heart of the other, glowing with a bright light. He immediately stabbed him, ordering him to finally die. All the boy's strength was aimed at destroying the parasite. Before disappearing forever, it shone brighter than the sun, as if it was about to explode. The massacre was over when nothing remained after the monster, not even a hint of its existence. After getting to his feet, Zhang Yu discovered that due to his strength, some objects around him were still flying. But the most important thing in all of this was that the children remained safe, and the worker, although well battered, was still alive. Having straightened his own hair, the boy was pleased that he had finally taken revenge on someone else. Only now, this battle squeezed all the juice out of him. So the next moment it began to quickly get dark before his eyes, and within a second he was lying on the asphalt unconscious. Opening his eyes, Zhang Yu saw in front of him a destroyed city burning in fire. He sincerely did not understand why the gathering place had changed so much after such a short period of time. He also did not notice how he was surrounded by several dozen others intending to attack. They instantly swallowed him up completely, without giving even the slightest hint of salvation. The sun disappeared. The dark side enveloped the world, and hope was lost. Some danced at the feast, while others screamed in pain. Some understood everything, and some did not. Fortunately, all this was just a bad dream, from which he was pulled out by the same night watch worker who was trying his best to bring the boy to his senses. Even after waking up, Zhang Yu had a strange feeling. After killing someone else, the memories were cut off. The guy sitting opposite was still trying to get at least some kind of answer from his savior, and he finally called himself names, breaking away from his own thoughts. The boy saw that the worker was in serious condition. However, he was surprised that even with such a small amount of blood, he could still stand on his feet. The guy, making sure that Zhang Yu was okay, touched his shoulder and simply asked him to sit next to him against the wall. They both collapsed to the ground in relief, exhaling and finally relaxing. Their conversation did not carry any serious overtones, but the boy was surprised that the guy did not recognize him. Although they lived in the same house, he seemed to have difficulty seeing due to lost blood, so he asked if Zhang Yu worked for an hour on the night watch. He also did not believe it when he heard a negative answer. The other was strong, and no one except the night watch could defeat him. The poor guy even laughed, suggesting that the boy did not want to admit his activities because of his homeless appearance. The night watch worker did not stop joking and trying to defuse the situation in a unique way, clapping Zhang Yu on the shoulder. He was not delighted with this and did not quite understand how the guy managed to laugh in such a state. The patrol people were amazing. The boy lied to his interlocutor when he asked what university he was studying at and what course he was taking. It would be better this way, because they didn't recognize him anyway. But the guy continued to ask seemingly inappropriate questions, asking Zhang Yu for various information. Suddenly interrupting, he asked the boy for a cigarette. Since the young man did not smoke, he instead offered the worker bakey, a sweet cookie similar to a straw. Pulling the package out of his pocket, he discovered that everything was broken, but it was still possible to eat. so he handed it to the guy. He was somewhat surprised by the small size of the bike, and the boy jokingly suggested that he collect what fell on the asphalt during the fight. The employee refused, after which an awkward silence fell between them, which was soon interrupted by asking Jung Yu if this was the first time he killed someone alone. Having received a positive response, the guy admitted that he had always admired those who skillfully handled the martial arts. He thought it was fascinating. Unlike the boy, he has lower qualifications and the attack power is much weaker, which is why he looks so hopeless. Jang Yu decided to interrupt someone else's monologue, thinking that it would still be better if he did not chat in order to save energy until help arrived. After assuring the young man that everything was fine, the guy continued to talk about how it's not every day that a civilian gets the opportunity to fight someone else. Either way, he was terribly weak. Jang Yu asked if he regretted it, to which the employee exclaimed that it was only his choice and there was no room for regret. He almost burst into tears, justifying himself that he had a good life and he himself transferred to the humanities specialty because he was simply kicked out of martial arts. He was interrupted by a sudden cough, and the boy asked him to be careful. The worker was sure that help would arrive soon because the signal had been sent quite a long time ago. Jang Yu stood up, feeling relieved after these words, but he was stopped and asked to sit until the rescuers arrived. The boy was pretty tired of other people's chatter, but there was nowhere to go. Quite a lot of time passed, and the guy continued to tell all sorts of stories from his life. At some point, he started talking about the university and Director Zhu from the Specialty of Extraordinary Technologies. Not being satisfied with his teaching method, he spoke about it in a not very positive manner. Jang Yu was not impressed by such talk, but continued to remain silent. Therefore, the guy continued to talk about Director Huang from the direction of culture, and also asked the boy to convey words of gratitude to her for her efforts. The young man hastened to interrupt his interlocutor, saying that he should still better take a notebook or let him come and tell all this to these people. The night watch worker realized that he had been carrying everything inside himself for a long time and just wanted to find someone to chat with. He even felt a little upset, remembering the Beidou Academy, and would like to come there again. Suddenly, he asked the boy for a couple of more sticks, holding out his hand, and he gave him one. Soon, a gap began to form nearby, and it seemed that it was the night watch's reinforcements that had arrived. Jang Yu was incredibly pleased that they had finally arrived, and he would now be able to leave. Taking the package with the remaining surviving products, he rose from his seat and hurried away. The guy called out to the boy, asking if he would go with him, to which he replied that he would get there himself. He wished him a happy journey, after which their paths finally diverged. After a while, the young man looked back to see how the night watch workers were doing their job. Observing all this from afar, he slowly began to activate the breach in order to return back to the real world. Unexpectedly, he noticed how the wounded worker's blood count began to fall. He sincerely did not understand why his colleagues did not want to help him, because, with current technologies, this was quite possible. However, they only stood in front of the dying man and saluted him before his blood counts reached 0. Jang Yu didn't have time to do anything because he was already halfway to returning to the real world. Finding himself in the middle of the street in a wrinkled t-shirt and dirty with blood, the boy did not understand why everything ended in the worst way. But the rules on the night watch were the same for everyone. The special ones had to remember that they should not give up even in the last minutes of their lives. And when they realized that the chances of survival are low, they must approach the pill with the utmost care and caution. The special ones must remember all those who have fallen and boldly move forward until all others are destroyed. They must monitor the earth and sky, patrol it day and night, thinking only about a happy future. Mortals have to observe inexplicable things, moreover, resist them because they are the night watch. Rising in the elevator to the 8th floor, Jang Yu felt nothing but emptiness within himself. The young man could not believe that the guy really died because he constantly laughed it off while he was chatting. It turns out that he just wanted to find someone to talk to before he died. No flowers, no applause. The young worker passed away quietly, just like an ordinary person. But it didn't matter how ordinary he was. Jang Yu will never forget him. Throwing the bag of groceries onto the table, the boy decided that he would not do anything else today, so he would now wash himself and immediately go to bed. Seeing in the reflection of the mirror a stripe above his head made of 55% blood, he did not understand why, with such an amount, he felt unwell. The young man realized that training only your body is not enough. Willpower is also very important. The food he had taken out of the refrigerator suddenly fell to the floor when he heard his girlfriend's voice suddenly calling out to him. Lu Yaoyu reproached the boy for not answering the phone, and he also did not appear at home for a long time. Zhang Yu began to make excuses that the new year was coming soon, and there were huge queues in the stores, so he had to stay late. He asked where his friend got the keys, and the girl replied that the guy doesn't cook, doesn't order food, and because of this, Uncle Lee asked to look after him. Approaching closer, Lu Yao noticed many scratches on someone else's body and asked what happened to him. But the boy did not answer and reproached his friend that it was time for her to go home, because it was already late and Uncle Lu would again misunderstand everything. She grabbed Zhang Yu and tried to turn him to face her, but he stubbornly resisted. Suddenly her gaze fell on the hand she was holding. The jacket was torn, and this meant that the fight was serious. Lu Yao again asked how he managed to get hurt like that, and the boy again answered nothing and pulled his hand out of someone else's grip. He began to make excuses by saying that on the way home he was attacked and robbed, but then he caught up with this robber and beat him up, so there is no point in feeling sorry for him. The young man praised himself, because his friend could not even imagine how good his reaction was. That upon the arrival of the police, it was difficult to even recognize the attacker as a person. Listening to all these nonsense, the girl was silent, and only after a couple of seconds she touched someone else's wounded face with her gentle fingertips. She peered at him carefully, trying to discern at least some hint of truth in the words spoken earlier. The boy immediately realized that Lu Yao would never believe such nonsense, so he seriously panicked. They stood in tense silence for an indefinite amount of time. The girl was the first to interrupt her, asking if it hurt where she was touching. The boy refused, saying that he just wanted to sleep. Abruptly removing her hand, Lu Yao said that this incident should be told to Uncle Lee. The guy grabbed his girlfriend's hand, trying to stop her, but in the end, he simply fell to the floor, completely exhausted. She immediately rushed to him, sitting next to him and assuring him that he needed to go to the hospital. But Zhang Yu asked to do without extreme measures because everything he needed was at home. Soon the young man was literally howling in pain as the girl treated his wounds. He was outraged that Lu Yao turned him into a mummy by wrapping him in a bunch of bandages at the same time. But the girl interrupted and somewhat irritably asked whether the boy would get involved in such fights again and asked him to swear that he would not. Zhang Yu explained that this is something that is inherent in boys by nature, and they cannot live without fighting, for which he immediately received a slap in the hat. His friend came at him with her fists. In the end, he had to resign himself and blurt out that in subsequent cases, he would simply watch from the sidelines and not participate in a mediocre manner. At this point, Lu Yao left him alone, warning him that she was leaving, after which she loudly slammed the door, leaving him alone with his sores. The guy lay on the sofa for a sufficient amount of time, with his head in the clouds and thinking about different things. Suddenly, he remembered the request made by the deceased night watch worker. He needed to convey a message to Beta. However, he completely did not take into account that he did not even say his name, and Zhang Yu did not deign to ask what his name was. Sleep did not come. Zhang Yu displayed a hologram in front of him because he was interested in knowing whether his first kill would be displayed somewhere else. As soon as he started looking for information, the guy discovered a new skill. Insidious Strike. This is a sneak attack from the shadows that the enemy cannot see. The first attack deals enormous damage. Deciding to immediately test the acquired skill in practice, the boy rose from his seat and stood in the middle of the room. He said the name of the technique out loud, making the appropriate gesture, but nothing happened. Zhang Yu was already scared that the system had messed something up, but most likely it was because there was no target for the attack. Plopping back onto the sofa, the boy became too lazy to look for it, so he would try the newly acquired skill later. Having displayed information about himself on the hologram, the young man discovered his stalker status. This meant that he was a born killer, operating from the shadows. He didn't quite understand why a shadow could only act fully in the dark, and what to do then in the light of day. It turned out that his shadow has undergone drastic changes, and now Zhang Yu can fully control it, that is, merge with it. There were many points describing the enhancements when merging with it, but most of all, the boy was interested in the fourth point, which talked about the slow approach of death in a critical situation. All this looked tempting, so he did not hesitate and immediately summoned a shadow. She appeared as always, from the floor, first being a black clot and then taking the form of its owner. Jiang Yu extended his hand towards her, sticking out his index finger, and the shadow did the same, touching the man. In an instant, the guy began to be enveloped in dark energy, absorbing every cell of his body, not leaving even a millimeter of clean skin. When the merger was completed, the young man was delighted with what had just happened. Jiang Yu immediately began testing himself. First of all, he checked his speed, and it was very impressive. Next came a test of strength. He was able to lift the bed with one hand. There was also a test of defense. The guy hit himself in the face with a 100-kilogram hammer and did not receive a single injury. He felt invincible, but his joy was interrupted by the screams of his neighbors coming from below. It was late at night and the boy was making too much noise. Deciding to end it here, Jiang Yu returned to his human form and again brought the hologram in front of him, being completely satisfied with the shape of the shadow. Now he had some of the abilities of this form, but official and full possession of it had not yet been achieved. Once fully acquired, no one else will have this ability. Of course, there were risks, but these risks could turn into opportunities. The guy had a choice of yes or no, but he was confused by the fact that the system highlighted the word risks in red. He doubted until the last moment, and it turned out to be so long that the system itself made a choice for him by pressing the yes button. Dark energy jumped out of the hologram, absorbing Jiang Yu and wrapping him in a kind of cocoon of transformation. Things in the room shook, and the glow from the window seemed to be visible in the next block. But all this was unimportant. Now, a born killer appeared before the world, capable of turning the scales. After activating this form of shadow, he saw the following information on the hologram. His killing ability has been greatly increased, and the need for a certain balance of blood volume has been reduced. When the victim's blood volume reaches a certain limit, the stripe will turn scarlet and he will be able to watch the victim's gradual death. When attacking, he can activate the decapitation skill, which depends on the blood level, strength, ability, and other factors of both parties. Then, Jiang Yu realized that the decapitation skill was activated the last time he killed someone else. After gaining the abilities and hearing the information, the boy began to consider himself invincible. Suddenly, he began to remove all the bandages from himself, and when it came to the last one, he found not a single wound on himself. Even the deepest one disappeared. However, it was not the drugs, because they do not act so quickly. Having torn off a blood crust from a wound on his stomach, the guy was amazed at how fast his recovery power was now. The next day, Lu Yao Yao met with her friends, who took notice of Jiang Yu's profile, pointing to a new post published that night. They wondered if their friend knew anything about it, and made various theories about the text written in it. The girl asked not to believe Jiang Yu because the wounds he received were from a dog, and not from a crowd of attackers, as he said. Lu Yao Yao invited them to see for themselves. So soon, all three of them were soon standing in front of the front door of someone else's apartment. As soon as she inserted the key into the lock, the two friends wondered where she got it from. The girl immediately justified that Uncle Jiang Yu gave her this key, after which she confidently walked inside, loudly notifying the guy that they had come to visit him. It was a surprise to find the boy sitting in the middle of the living room with an open wound on his stomach and bleeding. Lu Yao Yao immediately rushed to help him, and the two friends watched everything from afar, seeming to begin to believe that he really suffered, and the post was not a lie. Unable to restrain themselves, they pounced on Jiang Yu, assessing his physical fitness, and pawed at everything they could reach. Unable to bear such impudence, the girl escorted them both out the door, then slamming it. The friends were not delighted with this, but did nothing to counterbalance it, looking at each other and deciding that Lu Yao Yao could handle it herself. The girl asked the boy not to pretend because the ointment with which she treated his wound could not cause pain. Well, he stopped when he noticed a wound on the girl's knees. The guy said that it also needed to be properly treated, but Lu Yao Yao ignored this and continued to do her job. She said that she asked Xiao Kun, that same dubious merchant, a medicine that will definitely help Jiang Yu never get into fights again. The guy was noticeably upset when he heard this, but the girl immediately grabbed her friend's cheek, encouraging him. She again, only this time absolutely seriously, asked what he was doing yesterday and asked him not to invent any nonsense. Calling yesterday an act of knightly justice, Jiang Yu was completely calm, and one would think that he was telling the truth. But they didn't believe him. Again. Deciding to take the topic in a different direction, the guy asked what time Uncle Lu returned yesterday. It turned out that he had not returned, so Jiang Yu shared his thoughts that the night watch was quite cruel. Lu Yao Yao was noticeably upset, but that was understandable. She was too worried about her father. Most night watch officers put their lives in danger every day. The girl asked if the boy would come on patrol if he passed the martial arts exam. He thought about it because he really didn't know the answer to this difficult question. The prospects were frightening, and the guy did not want to connect his life with such a person. Turning it all into a joke, he said that he would go there if there were beauties there. Lu Yao Yao became enraged, seemingly jealous of Jiang Yu, and began to fight him. They were arguing so loudly that the two friends outside the door already thought that they would kill each other. So they decided to intervene. As soon as the showdown was over, the guy got dressed and enthusiastically asked his friends why they had come. They explained how they saw that he had a hard time yesterday, so they came to visit and find out if he was better today. Jiang Yu invited both of them to sit down, after which he began to tell a fascinating story about how he was attacked by a robber. Lu Yao Yao, realizing that he was at his mercy again, decided to go to the store and at the same time throw away his torn things along the way. Being too carried away by the story, the boy waved his hand, saying, "Okay," continuing to tell his friends about a bunch of men who were going to attack him. Suddenly realizing something, the guy suddenly rushed towards his girlfriend. She froze in place, and a package of pads fell out of the clothes she was holding in her hands. In shock, Lu Yao Yao asked why he needed them. Well, Jiang Yu explained that he noticed how her stomach hurt, so he decided to make it nice by presenting such a gift. He picked up the package and handed it to the girl, asking her not to be shy about such basic things. But the boy did not hear any gratitude. Lu Yao Yao was very embarrassed and, out of anger, threw the package right at the boy's forehead. The guy didn't understand why he was treated this way, which is why he was a little upset. And now there was a red mark from the blow on his forehead. Friends, watching the next squabble between the lovebirds, decided to interrupt them and inform them that, perhaps, they would go. When Jiang Yu was left alone in the apartment, he felt relieved. Now, no one would bother him. By using the shadow pupil and then the shadow form, the boy could finally immediately begin the training he had dreamed of for so long. Having passed through the gap into the dark world, the guy found it strange that there should be a lot of pollution in the area that would make him feel bad. But everything was exactly the opposite. He only felt comfort. He felt as if he had lived in a polluted environment for a long time, and then suddenly found himself in a vast and clean space. The stomach also no longer hurt, and the blood volume increased slightly to 60%. When Jiang Yu started training, he decided to start with push-ups. But as soon as he did one push-up, it was as if something had thrown him off the ground. The force was so enormous that the boy simply did not calculate it. The energy was inexhaustible, but still he was able to cope with it, doing more than 100 push-ups in a short period of time. During training, the shadow bite was activated, which absorbs only darkness from the shadow layer, and his physical condition is significantly strengthened. In the end, Jiang Yu managed to obtain about 1,000 ways of strengthening. The room was too small for further heavy loads, so the guy moved outside. For some reason, he began to believe that since he was so capable in this world, that means he should be worshipped. And in order to be worshipped, you need to become popular. Becoming a horizontal bar champion seemed like a very impressive idea to him, so the boy immediately continued his training. Meanwhile, an important meeting was taking place at the Night's Watch headquarters, at which issues of disorder in the shadow layer and high levels of pollution, which began to spread over large areas, were raised. These areas were mainly residential areas, which was a very strange phenomenon, because this had never happened before. After the general meeting, there followed a meeting of the detachment, the head of which was Lu, the father of Lu Yao Yao. Outwardly, he looked annoyed, but his thoughts were filled with events that had been happening lately. In 2 days, there were as many as 4 incidents where people were dragged into the shadow layer. It might seem that this is extremely small, but no one knew when the others would attack next time. Compared to the shadow layer anomaly, breaches are much more dangerous. If you compare someone in the shadow layer with a ferocious beast, it feels as if Godzilla has begun his attack. Lee broke the dead silence, calling on everyone in the room not to lose heart. He stated that these were all just suspicions, so they shouldn't act like they had already lost. In addition, the Night Watch is always ready for battle. Some were not happy with this speech. On the contrary, this speech encouraged some and forced them to come to their senses. Therefore, the meeting continued, but on a more positive note. It was quite long and exhausting. After finishing, when almost everyone had left, Lou went to the huge window which overlooked the city. He took what he thought was a pack of cigarettes from his inner pocket. Clutching one of the cigarettes between his teeth, the man began to look for a lighter, and only after a few seconds he realized that it was cookies and not real cigarettes. Lou didn't know who replaced them, but he was clearly angry that it happened. Suddenly, another package flew at him, which the man caught with one hand. This savior was the armless Lee, Jiang Yu's father, who began jokingly teasing his colleague. Well, Lou decided to play along by demonstratively eating a cookie and declaring that he was very afraid of lung cancer. This made Lee laugh so much that he dropped his own cigarette from his mouth. But Lu Yao Yao's father was not in the mood for long jokes, so, frowning, he immediately asked why he detained him. Lee became gloomier than a cloud, taking another puff. After a short pause, he finally said that something else had come from above. The colleague demanded that we not hesitate and tell them what had not yet been voiced at the meeting. The situation became even more tense when Jiang Yu's father said that this information was urgent. Lu sat back on his chair preparing to hear everything, but he asked to check the laptop. It turned out that it was a notice that their children needed to apply to join the university, but before that, they would need to pass an exam. For them, as fathers and not special ones on the Night Watch, this information was indeed sad. Lai was sure that his son, Jiang Yu, did not stand out in any way and wanted him to learn ordinary crafts. The colleague could not believe what he heard and tried to convince his friend, saying that the boy had not even been tested yet. In addition, admission to the faculty of special people was a must. The man put out his cigarette and, rising from his chair, put on his jacket. Throwing a brief, "Let's see," at Lu's monologue, he hurried out. At the door, Lee almost knocked over the secretary, finally turning around and asking his colleague to carry out his duties with special care. When the secretary finally managed to go inside, she provided her boss with a folder that contained a message from the shadow layer that she had just received. It contained a new report on the others, codenamed Crazy Shadow Athlete Who Salutes. From the description, one could learn that the enemy was a dark, shadow-like creature. The target was first discovered in the central garden. I found myself in society by chance. Also, the target does not get tired at all, showing interest in sports. She had no desire to attack. When the detector approaches, the enemy stops training and salutes. Hazard rating, low. There is no need for destruction at this time. The girl found this other strange, and she also couldn't find any records about him in the database, so she wanted to ask Lu about it. Lu himself, having studied the report, for some reason was angry, so the secretary is unlikely to wait for an answer from him now. Meanwhile, in the shadow layer, the fun was in full swing. Jiang Yu was broadcasting live, filming someone else in the form of a spider. He told various facts about spiders and also tried to convince his subscribers that the animal's meat is very tasty. After finishing the broadcast, the guy decided to look at the posts of other authors, and what was his surprise when he discovered that someone else was filming others. This meant that he had a competitor. Suddenly, a hologram appeared in front of him, which scared him to death. It displayed a warning that if the boy did not act first, he would die. It was necessary to kill someone else in order to continue a quiet life. The time allotted for execution was 100 hours. At the end of time, if the condition is not met, Jiang Yu will die. Panic made the boy feel feverish, and the words that he had only 100 hours left seemed to echo in his head. Of course, he remembered that when opening a skill, there were certain risks, but Jiang Yu could not imagine that the risks could be so terrible. Exhaling, the guy clenched his palms into fists and tried to collect his thoughts. He urgently needed to come up with something. Based on the description of the decapitation skill, which said that if he did not act first, he would die, the boy concluded that he needed to fulfill the position of a hunter and, accordingly, hunt. In other words, he can live while he kills others. Risky living and constant killing are part of being a hunter. Perhaps he could gain endless life by committing endless murders. He also has a different personality, and upon the death of his physical body, it will simply pass into another shell. But Jiang Yu couldn't quite figure out what another shell meant. And he also couldn't understand what it meant to enjoy the process of killing, because he couldn't possibly be happy because of it. As a last resort, if Jiang Yu cannot kill someone else, he will have to turn to Uncle Lee. Peeking out from around the corner where he was hiding, the guy was trying to hastily figure out how he could deal with the sleeping spider other in order to earn hit points. Realizing that such an opportunity came up quite rarely, he decided to record a video, setting the camera on a timer. Having placed the phone near the bucket and propped it up with a stone, Jiang Yu moved a little further away. With a wave of his hand, the guy instantly took the form of a shadow, becoming invisible to others. At the same moment, a corresponding sound sounded, indicating that the recording had begun. Since it was a broadcast, Jiang Yu immediately warned his viewers that today on air there would be a hunt for someone else in the guise of a spider. Under the broadcast, there were many different comments that the boy would read later, but for now, he is quietly sneaking towards the spider. In order not to disturb the silence, he fell silent, eventually creeping as close as possible and swinging the bat. The steel on which several thousand yen was spent is about to go into action. From the sudden blow, there was an equally sudden cry from another, mixed with a squeal and hiss. The spider turned instantly, hoping to discover who dared to disturb his rest, but the boy managed to dodge, hiding behind him. Angry, the other began to spin around, trying to find at least someone, but Jiang Yu managed to professionally hide his presence. All this was like catching up with an invisible man. At some point, the spider stopped and seemed to understand what was happening here. This made the boy's heart beat 100 times faster, but this time it went away. Even standing close to another, he will not be able to see him. The shape of the shadow contributed to this, and the boy adored the hell out of it for it. It was necessary to find out as quickly as possible about the weaknesses of the other, and, oh, how lucky Jiang Yu was! The spider opened from the side where it was exactly. The boy's eyes flashed and he prepared to strike. Grasping the bat with both hands, the guy swung it at the other guy. At that moment, a terribly insane smile appeared on his face, describing the excitement of the situation. Half an hour before, Spider, other was peacefully wishing on the asphalt, enjoying the calm atmosphere in the world in which he now found himself. There is no depressing atmosphere in it, and in his opinion, the guys are terrifying and strong. He just has to be careful, then he can live in complete comfort. But just now, the spider had to fight with one ugly guy, as a result of which he got a little injured. But he got a full lunch. Having buried his face in the asphalt, the other was going to sleep a little and recover. It's a pity, but his dreams were not destined to come true. The so-called spider sensors went off, notifying that someone was nearby and was being watched. Not seeing anyone in front of or behind him, the other could not understand where the feeling of someone else's presence came from. Agreeing that perhaps this place was simply unsafe, the spider decided to move to another place and spend the night there. Only now, his plans collapsed one after another. A crushing force approaching from behind forced him to stop and turn around. At another moment, he found himself thrown onto the asphalt with his whole body, unable to even move, let alone say anything. Looking at the bat sticking out of the wound on the spider's back, Jiang Yu couldn't stop admiring his shadow power flowing out of him almost like a river. It turns out that by finding the right point to strike, he could release all his power. Having pulled out the bat, the boy prepared for a new blow, having previously analysed the other's condition. He had only 40% of blood left. He was already ready to act when a spider's paw flashed before his eyes, aiming straight at his forehead. The crushing force threw the guy several meters back, forcing him to roll head over heels and slam into the wall. Even though there were cracks in it, Jiang Yu still didn't feel any pain. None at all. And all thanks to the shape of the shadow. The spider became enraged and stood on end, starting to scream about some incomprehensible chrysanthemum. This only brought a smile to the guy's face, because thanks to hitting a weak spot, he managed to cause bleeding in another, due to which he was rapidly losing percentages of blood. Rising to his feet, Jiang Yu concentrated all his strength on using the shadow attack skill. He began to slowly sink under the asphalt, as if it were not asphalt at all, but just water. Finding himself in the depths, under his opponent, the guy was delighted with the skill. He was like a stalker attacking from the shadows. There is no need to fight another face-to-face with this ability. You just need to wait for the right moment to attack, and then deal the fatal blow to the victim. The spider was getting weaker every second, and Jiang Yu seemed to be getting stronger seeing this. It doesn't matter who was who, different, special, hunter or prey. One thing was clear. The real hunt had begun. In the girl's hands there was a phone, on the screen of which there was a stream about the night watch. A young guy with glasses was about to tell and explain the formation of low-ranking others, but the girl immediately flipped through it. On the next stream, there was a review of some small restaurant in an alley. But she also turned out to be uninteresting. All subsequent streams were no less uninteresting. The girl, shaking her leg, seemed to be flipping through them non-stop, trying to find at least something that would interest her. Next to her on the bed lay a sweatshirt and a couple of other things that she was too lazy to put away. Having come to terms with the fact that lately the streams had shown nothing interesting, but only nonsense, she was ready to put the phone aside. However, suddenly someone was able to attract her attention. The girl came across the same stream of Jiang Yu, where he was in the form of a shadow and fought with an alien spider. She was lucky to scroll through in time. The battle was in full swing and, it seemed, was not going to end. Not believing her eyes and ears, she jumped on the spot and grabbed the phone tighter, trying to take a closer look at what was happening on the screen. At this moment, the boy explained what kind of creature it was and what it was called. He also talked about what terrible sounds he can make that ordinary people cannot stand. The girl turned her attention to the stream chat, where there were a wide variety of comments. She was not at all impressed by them. She considered them to be a flock of sheep. As it turned out, the new viewer hated such impudent behavior. Having gathered her resolve, she decided to intervene and wrote in the chat that she could help Jiang Yu, but he, naturally, did not care about the chat. He was busy fighting and was only focused on winning. Using one of his skills again, the guy seeped underground, disappearing from the frame. The girl was very impressed by this, and she began to wonder what kind of technique he was using. At some point, it even seemed to her that this broadcast was being conducted by someone else. Every second, it became more and more interesting, and it seems that she began to suspect something was wrong. Instantly, Jiang Yu jumped out of the ground, aiming at his enemy. He kicked the metal pipe with all his might, right at the spider's weak point. It pierced his flesh, spattering blood everywhere and once again causing a heart-rending cry from the other. Using the last of its strength, the spider swung its clawed paw, aiming at Jiang Yu. He must have expected to kill the boy with one blow, but in his place there was only a hole in the asphalt. Because of the fuss, there was a wall of smoke around. Another hesitated, looking around and trying to detect someone else's presence. At the most unexpected moment, Jiang Yu poked his finger into the side of the spider. He squealed and immediately turned around, looking completely furious. And the boy rested imposingly on the other's body and looked pleased. For greater effect, to surprise the audience, he showed the peace sign with his fingers. It seems that the situation was beginning to take a final turn. Jiang Yu used his skills to the fullest, mocking others as only he could afford. Watching the stream, the girl could not follow his movement. She was completely shocked by what she saw. And it seems that she managed to fall in love with him in just a couple of minutes. Hugging a pillow and wrapped in a blanket, the spectator did not take her eyes off her new object of sympathy. The next moment, she saw the spider other using its ability and spraying the guy with acid. The acid, of course, did not get on him, but everything around him was now covered in this unpleasant purple substance. Another was already glad that his enemy had fled in fear and horror, so in a mocking tone, he called on him to return and fight. Jiang Yu spent all this time saving up his strength for the next trick, running past the spider so quickly that it was almost blown away. The next moment, the boy found himself on the roof of the building, which made the spider taken aback. With pride and mockery in his eyes, the guy said that shadows are everywhere and he will not be able to hide anywhere. Like lightning, he ran across the windows of the building, about to strike. But the spider used a retaliatory ability with acid, this time spraying the building, hoping to at least hit the enemy now. Jiang Yu could move freely in the shadows, teleport and go through buildings as much as necessary. He was a hunter from the shadows who skillfully uses his abilities against the incompetence of others. Having prepared the bat, the guy swung it and hit the other, stunning him. The next moment, he pierced his spider head right through with the same bat. Remnants of acid poured out of his mouth, but it felt like it didn't hurt the boy in any way. Finding himself under a different identity, Jung Yu, as in all cliched superhero films, introduced himself to him with the name Yu, his pseudonym from the streaming platform. A little time passed after the guy got out from under the weakened spider carcass. In this state, he could no longer do anything, so the boy decided to finish by pointing his hand at the other and using a shadow bite. The spider began to be enveloped in thick layers of shadow, literally sucking the life out of it. At this moment, Jung Yu felt his body fill with new strength and power. All these sensations were new to him. After being completely absorbed, the boy felt like a superhero. At this point, his hunt was over, and from the rest only remains in the form of bones remained. He placed his foot on the skull for the perfect shot as the chat exploded with admiring comments. Barely containing her own feelings, the girl pressed the phone to her chest. Still, in the end, unable to restrain herself, she returned her gaze to the screen and literally beamed at how beautiful and ideal everything that happened was. She immediately subscribed to this boy's channel, intending to draw his attention to herself. She really wanted to establish contact with this young blogger, so she took extreme measures. At that very second, having sent him a message asking if he would like to take Star V with him on the next mission, the girl impatiently began to wait for an answer. Other name, Shadow Spider. His appearance, Ancient Demon. Level, first level of middle rank. The description read, "This is the lowest of another abyss, belonging to the genus of Ancient Demon." The lines on his body represent his strength. The denser and more complex they are, the greater the pollution that emanates from him. His abilities include acid, net spitting, and ancient demon pollution. The price of murder, confusion of the five senses. For using Shadow Bite, Jang Yu received the ability Shadow Net, as well as shadow glasses and spider records. Reading this information, he couldn't believe that he was only a first-level middle rank. It felt like the boy had defeated a strong enemy. There was a large gap in strength between him and this other, but the guy took advantage of the shadow attack. This is exactly what Jung Yu was thinking about as he returned to the place where he left his phone. Taking it in his hands, he discovered 150 viewers on the stream, which made him very happy. However, this was the end of the live broadcast. The guy wanted to leave the audience in the dark, thus stirring up their interest. Suddenly, he discovered previously unknown fishing lines around his palm, enveloping him. This was precisely the Shadow Network skill, which for some reason activated on its own. At the moment she shot at the top of the building, only Jang Yu had time to turn his hand to the right place. Not having a complete understanding of how to control it, the boy took off and flew to where the net was stuck. He grabbed it with his second palm and tried to take the situation into his own hands so as not to be smeared on the glass. And he did it! Now, Jung Yu looked like Spider-Man, exactly one-on-one. However, it was still not possible to avoid a collision. He crashed into a concrete wall at speed, leaving behind cracks and a clear trace of the body. The next moment, the boy began to rapidly fall down, unable to use the shadow net again. Fortunately, he managed to grab onto a street lamp and maintain his balance. This blow hurt, so he will have a lot more practice on his skills. Sitting on the lantern, Jung Yu opened a screen that showed his life expectancy. 7 days. It increased by only 3 days, and this is much less than he expected. However, even though there are still 7 days left, others are not so easy to find. Suddenly, the screen began to beep, displaying the following note. The hunter should hide in the shadows. The more he hides, the higher his reputation will be. Also now, a new value authority has been unlocked for him, as well as marking. With it, he can mark his victim to make it easier to find its weak points and strike. The victim will experience palpitations, fear, and other negative states. For a single target, a mark can only be created for 1 second. As reputation increases, this value increases. Each tag costs a certain amount of energy. This ability also reveals the hunter's location. Hunting. When he hunts marked prey, he receives bonuses to dexterity and strength. If you manage to hunt successfully, one of the attributes or abilities will be improved. The only thing that surprised Zhang Yu out of all this new information was authority. He could not understand when he managed to become so famous. But almost immediately it dawned on him. This was all due to the live broadcast and the small number of viewers. The plan was as reliable as a Swiss watch. He would hunt others, gain subscribers, and thereby discover new abilities. Today's work was not yet finished, so the boy was already ready to go to the next one. How unexpectedly he marked the enemy! In an instant he saw the other and all his weak points that needed to be hit. It seems that it was a gift from fate itself. Rising from the lantern, the boy hurried to his prey, not intending to let her go so easily. Having used decapitation, there was no longer even the slightest chance for survival. The hunter has become many times stronger from the kill, and his smile and gaze are even crazier than usual. The sun slowly went below the horizon, bestowing its warmth on only one part of the house. Zhang Yu had already returned from his walk, and was already receiving full help from his girlfriend. It seems she poked the cotton too hard on the cheek this time. The boy sitting on the floor exclaimed that this actually hurt, and pointedly grabbed the sore spot. Lu Yao Yao looked inspired as she held the peroxide in her hands, but at the same time, she reproached her friend, wondering who he had fought with this time. They moved to the sofa, but Zhang Yu remained silent, thinking about the answer and the situation in general. The guy asked his friend to calm down, and in general, he was going to become a hero, and she would never understand this. Lu Yao Yao looked at the boy as if he had just said some absolute nonsense. And the heroes, in general, don't whine every day about how much they hurt. The girl had her own methods to bring Zhang Yu to his senses, so in the next second, cotton wool with peroxide was already at his nose. Unexpectedly for both, the guy began to talk about how he could heal his wounds in a matter of seconds using the form of a shadow. And he doesn't turn it on at all so that his friend will help him. Lu Yao Yao didn't understand anything from what was said. She asked the question directly, trying to get a more adequate and understandable answer. But unfortunately, this did not happen. Zhang Yu fell for a fool and abruptly changed the topic, offering to watch a movie. The girl reached into her phone, declaring that there was nothing special to watch, but recently some new blogger had appeared on the internet, arousing everyone's interest. The guy immediately realized who she was talking about, but he decided to pointedly ask what kind of blogger he was. What if he was wrong in his guesses? Sitting closer, Lu Yao Yao held out the phone, showing the channel of a certain Yu with the pseudonym Killer from the Shadows. Stunned, Zhang Yu spat out water from his mouth, unable to believe his eyes. The girl was initially even frightened by such a reaction, looking at her friend with concern. Well, he looked back at her with a look that was not his own, wondering when she started looking at him. It turned out that it had been like this for 2 days now. Having cheered up, Lu Yao Yao sat back down, talking about this Yo and how he became the most popular and unusual blogger. Slightly nervous, Zhang Yu scratched the back of his head and said that this is all, of course, great, but the publication of others is punishable by law. He didn't like such quick fame and was worried that the Night Watch would catch him at this rate. The girl explained that she should not disclose her knowledge about others. And the blogger's current shows don't really influence people's consciousness, so everything is fine. Grabbing her friend's hand, Lu Yao Yao persistently began showing all of Yu's videos, calling him cool and saying that these are the ones who should be followed as an example. Yes, she was literally already head over heels in love with this blogger, and the compliments from her lips managed to seriously embarrass Zhang Yu. But the girl did not notice this. It's for the better. She also showed another video, but with a video analysis of the hunter. At the moment, the boy didn't care what his girlfriend was babbling. He looked at her and couldn't stop admiring her. Lu Yao Yao looked so interested, so passionate. It's a pity that she won't find out the truth. At least not right now. Zhang Yu was so lost in his dreams, hanging in the clouds, that he didn't even immediately hear the question from his friend. The girl asked him if she would also be able to become famous and gain such popularity. The boy answered quite directly and honestly, "What will she film? Put on a white silk dress and start dancing in the shadow layer?" Such dreams confused Lu Yao Yao, to which she immediately stated that she meant several videos about others, and not all of this. Zhang Yu laughed, calling such activities too informative and straight-up Night Watch style. He also pointed out the girl's home outfit, almost literally calling it provocative, and that if she went out into the street wearing it, her fans would start following her. You can't expect anything good from this. And the guy said this with absolute seriousness on his face. However, such sincerity and truthfulness made Lu Yaoyao suspect something was wrong. She instantly found herself behind her friend, taking out and loading a pistol. This really scared Zhang Yu. Putting the weapon to someone else's side, the girl began to accuse the guy of the fact that, it turns out, he too was tracking someone, as a result of which he received his injury. Raising his hands up, the boy panicked and began to make excuses that it was all a joke and she simply misunderstood his words. Lu Yaoyao snorted displeasedly, not intending to retreat from her position so quickly. And she was also in no hurry to put away her weapon. Arguing her actions by saying that Zhang Yu might be lying, the girl shoved his hand between his shoulder blades and ordered him to go cook food for them. Imagine the guy's relief when, after all this, his girlfriend finally left, leaving him to rest. Without ceremony, he landed his butt on the sofa and sighed long. The first thing Zhang Yu did was go to his phone and start checking notifications. He had a lot of personal messages from the streaming platform with a variety of contents. In truth, they even irritated him a little. So much so that the boy simply flipped through most of them. However, something still managed to attract his attention. In addition to the messages, there were also many mentions. Someone was worried and someone accused Yu of fraud. There were also comments to the effect that the video with someone else was fake. All this unsettled Zhang Yu for a moment, making her nervous. Suddenly, someone sent one suspicious link, which, of course, the guy clicked on. The video opened and an elderly man spoke. He usually made videos about shopping trips, but this time the video was on the topic of analysing one scammer. The old man began to tell his viewers that this yo is not real, like everything in that video, the shadow layer, the other, the amnesiac killer, and various songs. He analysed 2 frames of the recording, assuring that this was a splice, since there was no smooth transition between them. The man also paid attention to the background. He was sure that after filming the video, editing was also carried out. Zhang Yu, looking at all this, could not understand why some ordinary food blogger walking around personal restaurants was filming something like an exposing video on him. In addition, the boy only cut out a few photographs of himself. This cannot be considered Photoshop. At the end of the exposure, everything became clear. This man is a freelance employee of the Night Watch. When he was young, he killed countless others, so he can recognize a fake at a glance. When the old man changed the topic, the guy immediately went into the comments, hoping to find out the opinion of the audience. They had different contents. Some believed, justifying Yo, and others, on the contrary, began to accuse the young streamer of deception. To Zhang Yu, it made no difference. They were all fools who didn't understand anything. He was sure that someday they would find out the real truth. Having locked the phone screen, the boy rose from the sofa and immediately stretched, feeling relief in his muscles. He decided that since his video was fake, it was time to start hunting for others. But before that, he wanted to teach this old man a little lesson under the name Earthly Tao. And he had his own ideas for this. Having prepared himself, the born hunter and the man who brought terror to his enemies left the real world, going to the shadow layer. Almost nothing has changed about him since Zhang Yu's last visit. Everything is still disgusting and disgusting. Mini camera. It was this thing that the boy attached to his jacket in order to capture more interesting moments from the hunt. It looks like there are fewer others today than yesterday. The shadow layer is reset from time to time. After briefly exploring the area, the hunter discovered his new victim. It looked like it was another rank 6. A purple glow emanated from it and 4 tentacles peeked out of its mouth, which served as a tongue. The boy could not bear to find out what this other person was capable of. Grasping the bat tightly in both hands, he prepared to hunt. Taking a step forward, Zhang Yu almost fell from the roof. He was dreaming so hard. Unable to concentrate on his shadow skills, the guy had no choice but to sigh heavily and go down to earth in the usual way for people, using the stairs. It seems that he was a little nervous before such a grandiose event for himself. Another wandered between the streets, dispelling fear and horror. He looked truly terrifying. In addition to the tentacles, he had 2 rows of sharp teeth that seemed to easily tear apart someone else's flesh. But Zhang Yu could not give in. The guy concentrated and put a mark on his enemy, which quickly dissipated. However, this was quite enough for the person marked to immediately feel an inexplicable fear. By the way, he was very similar to the other one with the blades that the boy had encountered earlier. Has it really evolved? Even so, Zhang Yu had also undergone considerable changes in terms of strength and skill since then. Having prepared in advance for the attack, the hunter hit the other in the stomach with a bat using the 6-hit technique. The weapon sparkled and the monster soared several meters above the ground. From such a reception, another instantly lost a little more than half of his blood. Deciding not to get into a fight, he went on the run. But the boy was not going to let him go so easily, so he followed in pursuit. Since tag and chase were activated, stats such as strength and agility were increased by 1 second. He could receive additional boosts by killing a target within a certain period of time. At some point, the other stopped, floating in the air. This was the perfect moment for another attack, which Zhang Yu immediately launched. He fought it off with one swing of his hand, although it would be more correct to call it a solid blade, causing the hunter to be taken aback. And while the guy hesitated, another rushed at him, deciding that now it was his turn to attack. Our main character, as we know, is not made with a finger. He realized almost instantly, pushing off with his foot from the wall behind him so as not to be smeared on it. Because of this movement, the other missed, crashing into the stone surface and breaking it into pieces. Turning around instantly, the monster touched the asphalt with its claw, which created a disgusting sound that hit the ears. Instead of attacking the hunter again, the other one opened its mouth and began to make incomprehensible sounds, which instantly grew into a roar, hitting the eardrums no worse than a bat. He was so powerful that the guy could barely stand on his feet. It seemed like he was about to be blown away. The other did not stop his attack, increasing his roar in order to gain an advantage. Zhang Yu started to feel dizzy. And then it dawned on him that this was more of a mental attack than a physical one. Taking advantage of the boy's weakness, another struck him in the chest with his claws. The force of the blow was so crushing that the hunter was thrown several meters back. Literally immediately rising to his feet, he discovered that in one blow he subsequently consumed 34% of his blood. While the boy was thinking, the other was clearly not pleased with the stability of his enemy. Therefore, he approached him again. Zhang Yu realized that hitting at random this time would not work. It was necessary to adhere to some kind of strategy, and it was necessary to come up with it as soon as possible. The main character, using his favorite skills, accelerated with every second, which is why he deftly dodged the monster's attacks. The boy's movement turns out to be faster than the monster's paws, as a result of which it cannot hit the hunter. However, the other one still managed to catch up with the boy, hanging over him and extending his sharp limbs straight to his head. Opening its mouth, the monster again let out a heartbreaking roar. But he doesn't have time to attack first. Zhang Yu, having gathered himself, activates the skill and with a sharp movement hits the other one straight in the chest. Having lost orientation in space, the monster loses the ability to continue the battle for some time. Taking advantage of this, the hunter delivers a series of blows, jumping up. Almost all the hits were in the head of another, which gave an even greater advantage in the future. The boy's skills have not lost their efficiency and accuracy despite his evolution. On the contrary, it seems that the power has only increased, intensifying a couple of dozen times. The last blow turns out to be piercing. Zhang Yu hits the creature straight in the skull. Despite attempts to dodge, the monster falls exhausted to the ground. Bending over the other's head, the hunter uses the decapitation skill, intending to end the carnage. Suddenly, the resistance from the monster stops, unexpectedly for Zhang Yu himself. While the main character wonders what the hell is going on here, under the guise of another, a person appears to be absorbed by him. The hunter recognizes him as the guy from the Night's Watch who was supposed to be taken away, but apparently something went wrong in the end. The boy asks questions, which appear more and more every second. At this time, another rises from the asphalt and soars upward, growling menacingly and terribly. In surprise, the hunter jumps to the side, finding himself a couple of meters from the monster. And he, taking the opportunity, goes on the run. Zhang Yu immediately follows, trying to catch up with the entity, but due to the loss of precious time, he fails to do so. After a short chase, he stops in place trying to catch his breath. In the end, despite the failure, the hunter found his prey. He is a passionate man and looks forward to his next hunt. However, this was only text generated by the system. Zhang Yu himself had mixed feelings about this. The hunt was almost a success. But at the last moment, the victim disappeared. Unfortunately, the hunt failed. Continued failure will weaken the hunter and also shorten his lifespan. Deep down, he understands that only constant hunting will increase his authority and he will gain power over death. But in the moment one thinks, what does it mean to live? Is this hunting? Or something different? All these questions mixed into an annoying mess in my head. Zhang Yu hung his head, trying to ignore the hologram and its haunting text about waiting to die. But all patience comes to an end, and so does his patience. Hitting the sign with a flourish, he seemed to use all his remaining strength. A quiet crack was heard, and the boy ordered to stop escalating the situation. But the sound of the crash remained only a sound. There was no trace of the impact on the hologram. And the next moment, the guy realized that it was painful enough, and now his knuckles hurt. When the desired silence came, he straightened his own hair, thinking again. But a hero who sacrifices himself to save people becomes just that. Looking to the side, Zhang Yu was attracted by his own reflection in the mirror. Looking at him, the guy seemed even more upset by his own thoughts. If he dies, he will also turn into a monster similar to those he hunts. Determined that there was no turning back, the boy threw out the remaining anger and bitterness by hitting the reflection with his fist. He needs to keep hunting to survive, and he will continue to do this no matter what. Arriving at the #1 Eastern District, where there was a gathering place as well as a wasteland, Zhang Yu was focused on the phone screen, searching for the information he needed. The news once said that it was in this place that others constantly gather. Actually, the hunter now has nothing to worry about. Deciding not to linger any longer, the guy used the shadow pupil, teleporting to another, more convenient place for viewing. It was the roof of some building. The second part of the portal formed right above it. The hunter landed on the concrete with a loud sound. Being ready, he held his hands, ready to fight back. The number of others here was much greater than in any other place. However, they are not very brave, so they definitely won't leave the building, hiding like rats in the corners. Lady Fortune was kind to the hunter today. He found one outside the walls of the building. Another was sitting on the roof, literally a few tens of meters opposite him. This monster turned out to be incredibly strong at first glance. Because his leg was seriously injured, his blood volume had dropped greatly. Deciding that this was an incredible opportunity to finish the hunt with flying colors, Zhang Yu was not going to stumble again. Using extreme caution, the hunter quietly teleported closer. He watched the other from afar, studying him and his actions at the moment. However, the monster turned out to be vigilant, so it almost immediately revealed someone else's location behind its back. 4 dots on his body lit up, Zhang Yu's auxiliary ability to detect vulnerable spots. The boy himself disappeared, as if he had never been there. In its place, there were only clouds of dust and nothing more. Being beyond detection by others, the boy thought about it and realized that the local monsters were much more careful than on his territory. His target seems to be very sensitive. The red dots on the other's body weakened, precisely because of attentiveness. It was necessary to calm him down as soon as possible. We'll have to be patient, wait for the monster to calm down. But we didn't have to wait long. Another, as soon as he felt safe, sat back in his place, starting to eat the remains of food in the form of previously obtained prey. Not losing such a unique opportunity to fulfill his duty, Zhang Yu put a mark on him and began to hunt. In the real world, it was late afternoon. People will not start returning from their jobs anytime soon. Lu Yao Yao also thought so, standing behind the stove, so she mistook those who entered the apartment for her friend, immediately reproaching him for such a long absence. Being passionate about cooking, she threw the presentation over her shoulder in the style of "could have helped," not even suspecting who was behind her back. This someone turned out to be Uncle Lee and her father, who with serious faces began to joke about the fact that Lu had raised a daughter for the Leaf family. The girl immediately became embarrassed and began to deny it, saying that her father was talking nonsense. Again, while they undressed and went to the kitchen, she asked why they returned so early. It turned out that the office simply ran out of work, so they decided to leave. In addition, it is rarely possible to get together and have a delicious meal. Lu received an offer to go to a restaurant, but Yao Yao had almost everything ready. Li, who had already sat down at a chair waiting for the dish, suggested they go another day and now just sit together. While the girl was finishing her preparations and bringing food to the table, Jiang Yu's father asked where his son was disappearing. But Yao Yao didn't know, so she replied that perhaps he had gone out for a walk. The man found this act outrageous. After all, how could you leave your friend alone and go have fun yourself? And it was at that moment that the front door opened. Intoxicated by the smells from the kitchen, the boy did not even pay attention to the others present. All his words were directed at the food while he casually kicked off his shoes and tried to take off his torn jacket. In between, the guy said that he was in a good mood today, so he decided to buy the girl her favorite candy. From his words, it cost him a lot, because on the way, he was almost killed by dogs. Finally deigning to turn around, Jiang Yu found his father burning with shame, and Yao Yao's father, who was looking at him condemningly. The guy realized that he had said too much and unnecessary things, so he became nervous, swallowing noisily. He also put the much-praised candy in his pocket. We'll give it to a friend later. Suddenly changing his mood, the boy began to talk about the dog attack and the trouble along the way. But no one seemed the least bit interested. Li decided to smoothly change the topic and invited his son to the table, telling him not to spoil all the fun with his stories of adventures. Jiang Yu, of course, did not dare to object. He sat down next to his father, and he, in turn, tightly squeezed his shoulder, jokingly declaring that it was normal to get into fights. Lu decided to support his friend and colleague, also teasing the poor boy that there is nothing shameful if you try to attract the attention of the girl you like in this way. He also mentioned some girl in a short skirt, asking what her name was. The answer was not long in coming. Yao Yao named her Yu Jua. The man called her pretty and said that when he was young, he would have given everything for such a girl. Yao Yao didn't like this comment, but she didn't say anything. She just chuckled displeasedly. But Lu didn't pay much attention to this, offering to knock him out for his success. Jiang Yu, sitting exactly opposite his friend, could not understand how her father could say such a thing in front of her. The girl was blushing beyond belief, looking angry and embarrassed at the same time. Li distracted the guy from his thoughts by offering to raise their glasses. Openly nervous, the boy raised his glass. Mentally, he was afraid that these two men would not leave a wet spot behind him. Therefore, it was significant that I drank the contents in one gulp, despite the fact that the drink was non-alcoholic. Lu, Yao Yao's father, watching this little performance, mentally considered the guy to be quite good. Diluting the situation with conversations, Jiang Yu suggested that Lu eat vegetables because he is not at home all day, so he rarely gets the chance to eat his daughter's cooking. Lu agreed that this was quite a rare opportunity, and the guy decided to praise his friend, saying that her cooking skills were excellent. However, such praise did not impress the man. He looked at Yao Yao with indignation, not understanding why they always had takeout food at home instead of home-cooked food. Apparently, it's all about caring for Jiang Yu. She puts in too much effort and even prepares such a variety of dishes just for him. Seeing such a reaction to his own words, the boy was damn pleased. It seems that someone at home is waiting for a serious conversation. Their dinner time was slowly coming to an end. Having finally decided to drink to Uncle Lu once again, the guy could not resist praising him and wished him success in his work affairs. During the farewell, Jiang Yu looked inspired, unlike old Lu, who was not delighted with such arrogance and tactlessness. However, all this became unimportant when the door slammed shut and only the guy and his father were left in the apartment. The man headed into the living room to finally relax, but the boy continued to feel somewhat tense. Deciding to set things right, he offered his father some water. He refused, collapsing on the sofa. Jiang Yu had no choice but to silently drink the offered water himself. He drank it casually, seeming to become even more nervous. A tense silence hung in the room, and no one dared to break it. However, everything comes to an end. Li spoke first, saying that he wanted to ask his son something. Turning around with a serious face, he looked at the boy and asked if Jiang Yu thought that he had any abilities. This question seriously frightened the guy, and instead of giving a clear answer, he simply stared at his father, looking very stupid. Not finding words to continue the dialogue, the boy pointedly continued to drink water. Making himself more comfortable on the sofa, Lee began to address his son more seriously. The man is not stupid or blind so as not to recognize Zhang Yu's injuries. Service for 20 years on the night watch has paid off. He asked the question again, only this time directly. When did the guy develop abilities? He lowered his head, trying to collect his thoughts and find words for the correct explanation. Collapsed on the sofa next to him, the boy finally admitted that it was half a month ago. Another question immediately flew about how these abilities awakened. Looking at his father, Zhang Yu awkwardly asked if this was an interrogation. The man assured that there was nothing to worry about. Let him just continue to talk. And he took out a cigarette. Stroking his chin, the guy tried to remember how exactly his powers awakened. However, he himself did not really understand how this happened. They just suddenly appeared, and that's it. Lee responded somewhat incredulously, explaining that this kind of situation happens extremely rarely, about once a year. Shrugging his shoulders, Zhang Yu assumed that it was all thanks to his incredible talents. At that moment, the man became much more serious and had a somewhat threatening appearance, which made the guy nervous again. But Lee immediately exhaled, placing his hand on the boy's shoulder and telling him to relax. Zhang Yu thought it was his father's ability, but he wasn't completely sure. Another indefinite amount of time passed in silence, which Lee broke again, reminding him that there would be a test this year. Namely, everyone will have to pass a martial arts exam. Zhang Yu knew about this, as did Yao Yao. True, the man did not like that his friend also involved his daughter in this. From the subsequent conversation, the boy learned that in recent years, the night watch unit has been under extreme pressure, so the number of victims is constantly growing. Lee could give the guy a backup option if he suddenly couldn't pass the martial arts exam. Hearing the latter, Zhang Yu could not believe that such a thing was even possible. What other backup option is unclear. As a result, he will be able to choose one of several universities for admission. Lee suggested that since the guy liked comics, it means he could enroll in the art department, or something else, without any special problems. The boy jokingly asked if he could not go anywhere and just pick up the certificate, for which he received a tasty slap in the face, after which a visible mark remained on his cheek. There's no way Lee will let this happen. Zhang Yu will go to university anyway. It could even be Linden. They say there is a very favourable atmosphere there. And when the guy completes his studies, his father will get him a stable job, after which he can live happily with Yao Yao. The boy was not delighted with what he heard, not at all with the word. This seemed to confuse and anger me at the same time. Gritting his teeth, he lacked the courage to announce his plans. And Lee noticed this. Unexpectedly, Zhang Yu revealed that he wanted to try to become special. This seriously angered the man, so much so that he jumped up from his seat and shouted that the guy should obey him. Having come to his senses in time, Lee's facial muscles relaxed, and he tried to understand what had come over him. Frozen like that, pointing his hand and index finger at the boy, the man fell silent. Zhang Yu took advantage of the moment to voice his disagreement. The guy said that if Lee didn't allow it, he would go to the night watch and pawn him. Expecting obviously not such an answer, the man was shocked, completely confused for a moment. The boy, of course, is still a daredevil, but other than that, he couldn't give anything away, staring at his father. And he stared back at him. Realizing that Zhang Yu was serious, Lee tried to convince him, saying that all this was not a joke and the world of special people was much more dangerous than he could imagine. A guy can just study with peace of mind while the man takes care of everything. In response to this, an equally weighty argument was voiced. Danger lurks everywhere. Moreover, Lee will not be able to take care of Zhang Yu forever, and this is an undeniable truth. The man could not find a counter-argument to this statement, so an awkward silence hung in the room again. Exhaling, he only said that the guy would regret his decision. In any case, if the boy wants to transfer, he can always contact him at any time. Realizing that the conversation was over, Zhang Yu jumped up from his seat, asking not to put a spoke in his wheels during his admission. Lee just waved his hand at all this, saying that it was time for him to go. Suddenly, he was asked to stop. The man turned around. The guy said that last time he looked at the information that Yao Yao shared, it said that special ones must use all their powers before death so as not to turn into another. Therefore, the question followed. What if it is likely that a person will still become different, even if he has exhausted all his strength? The man thought for a moment before answering. A similar situation can arise if a person has special abilities or there were external interferences. This answer more than satisfied Zhang Yu, but Li couldn't understand why he was asking such a thing. To which the boy said that it was just a sporting interest. While putting on his shoes, the man began to explain that if the boy chooses martial arts, sooner or later he will have to face all this. He also asked Zhang Yu to take a break and stop fighting already. He naturally lied, promising to rest. Li also reminded that this year's test will take place before the new year. Before finally leaving, he gave the boy advice to prepare for the exam. And he just sighed long, agreeing. Since it was already dark outside, Zhang Yu turned on the light. Sitting down on the sofa, he stared at the ceiling, lost in his own thoughts. Memories popped up in fragments in his head, and the boy tried to put them together, but the puzzle still didn't fit. That guy became different because of his abilities? Or due to the influence of something external? The Night Watch must take all people, regardless of what abilities they have. Maybe Zhang Yu was wrong about something? Or does the other one have the ability to cause hallucinations? My head was getting heavier with every passing second. The publication of a new video from blogger Yu causes genuine delight in the grey-haired girl. Going lower, in the comments, she sees accusations and negative comments towards the hunter. Another deception. Special effects for the sake of popularity. Editing. Everything is teeming with such words. The girl doesn't like it at all, and it gets to the point where the video starts getting more negative comments than likes. Of course, the grey-haired woman does not intend to leave everything as it is. How dare they lie so blatantly about her idol? They don't understand anything at all. At some point, the girl stops typing. She just stares at her phone screen, trying to find the right words. Confident that brother Yo is definitely not a liar, she scrolls down the page and finds what she was hoping to find, namely, a new video. If he had lied, he probably would not have released new ones. The title of the video was the phrase, "If you don't kill, you will die." The beginning of the video focused on the hunter's legs and a view of the city below them. This caused genuine delight in the girl. It seems that she was a terribly fan of her idol. Thanks to full immersion, the grey-haired woman feels and can move next to the main character. His speed, skills, technique, and agility surprise her. She barely has time to grab someone else's shoulder, flying away somewhere with him. The wind hits her face painfully and the girl has to close her eyes, missing out on all the fun during the flight. However, sudden braking forces them to open them, clutching the boy tighter. Standing behind the idol, the grey-haired woman could not believe what was happening. Could this really be the powers of the special? A sudden sharp blow to the hunter's chest causes him to fly back and fall to the ground. The girl also flew away with him. The monster's massive paw presses the guy's body, pressing on him with all its weight. This other one looked simply huge, with a row of razor-sharp teeth visible from its mouth. However, Zhang Yu quickly collected his thoughts and rose from the ground using the newly acquired threads. A strong kick to the monster's face causes it to fly down onto the asphalt, changing roles with the hunter. The girl, who had been nearby all this time, continued to watch, experiencing all these events together with her idol, admiring him more and more every second. Zhang Yu rushed into battle, but the grey-haired woman remained on the sidelines, watching the battle between the different and the special as if live. The hunter continued to kick the monster's face, and the monster continued to punch the hunter in the stomach. The girl realized that all this was real. The video cannot be faked and there can be no mistake. The special one jumped up, attacking the monster again. Another, all this time trying to find an enemy who has slipped out of sight, only at the last moment notices his approach. Zhang Yu pierces the green body with her hand as if it were sharper than a blade, leaving 0% on someone else's blood meter. When the other was already lying on the ground, exhausted and motionless, only then did the boy deign to stretch out his hand, from which green liquid was dripping, just like blood. He used Shadow Bite, consuming the other. The girl standing behind was still watching all this. She couldn't understand how Yo did it. Is it all because he previously absorbed another spider? She was even somewhat angry at the fact that the boy would later receive new abilities. Arriving home, Jiang Yu first took off all his clothes, throwing them into the dirty laundry box. Entering the bathroom and approaching the mirror, he touched the wound on his cheek, which made him immediately shush him. It hurt so much. Having treated all the wounds and bruises, the guy wrapped himself in bandages. At the same time, he thought that others in that area were very strong, and if they had not been wounded, the boy simply would not have survived. Suddenly, a notification sound on the phone was heard, causing Jiang Yu to jerk nervously, turning around. It was again a new video from Earthly Tao and its new revelation on the latest video, Yu. As he stated, this time everything was more realistic, but nothing could escape his eyes. The man drew attention to the serious injury of another. Monsters in this state are very weak, so even an ordinary person can deal with them. From this, Tao concluded that special people should not pay attention to such weaklings. This statement left Jiang Yu dumbfounded. He immediately closed the video and locked the phone, not having the slightest desire to continue listening to this abnormal person. Although, on the other hand, he was right. The fight didn't turn out very well. And because of this, the boy was very angry. Collapsed exhaustedly on the sofa, the guy sighed. Analyzing the last battle, Jiang Yu realized that his current strength was not enough for anything more. Therefore, he must become stronger, so much so that no one else dares to doubt him. Inspired, the guy seemed ready to start new training right now, despite his fresh wounds. The following information was displayed on the hologram. Attribute, shadow glasses, 32 out of 32, life expectancy, 12 days, rating, looks strong but is actually weak. The boy was clearly not impressed by this assessment. He became even more angry. He didn't consider himself that way at all. Still, his current abilities are not enough. He needs to become stronger. Thanks to battles, he acquired new skills. First of all, regarding the shadow glasses, Jiang Yu thought it was an experience panel. But this seems to be an indicator of energy. It takes about 3 points to use shadow thread and shadow pupil. Beheading, mark, and chase have different degrees of consumption. Concentrating his power in his palm, he began to peer into it. The shape of the shadow depends on the environment. For example, in the shadow layer, the consumption will be low. If you just go into the shade, then consumption will be assessed as average, but in sunlight it will be high. Having grabbed the power in his hand, the guy inadvertently remembered that the test would take place very soon. The thoughts mixed up in his head put pressure on the boy's morale. Putting on his slippers, he headed out to the balcony to get some air. The boy thinks that special people are very strong. He can only fight them in the form of a shadow, and even then, he is unlikely to last long. But even the current force should be enough to scare them away. Looking at the night sky, Jiang Yu believes that everything will work out for him. Of course, many problems can arise, but he's not going to hold back. This is not about him at all. He will give his all, and then he will get the result. In any case, Uncle Lee will be for him, so what should he be afraid of? Having gone a little crazy from his own reasoning, the guy laughed so loudly that he could be heard on the floor below. The old man watering the flowers clearly thought his neighbor was crazy. The next day, Jiang Yu looked unwell. There were bags under his eyes from lack of sleep. The whole thing took place in a shopping center. He and his friend were sitting on a bench waiting for their friends, namely Yao Yao and the girls in glasses, who with undisguised pleasure chose new clothes for themselves. They only laughed at the boy's reproach, considering him stupid. Out of boredom, Jiang Yu fell on the fat man's shoulder, declaring that if he continued to waste his life like this, he would not last even a few days. The friend, in turn, asked not to joke like that on the eve of the new year, arguing that it was unlucky. Throwing jokes aside, the boy looked seriously and said that if he didn't kill, he would die. The fat man tensed at this statement, deciding to clarify what he meant. But, fortunately, Jiang Yu did not have to answer. At that moment, their two lost girlfriends returned, carrying several bags of new clothes in their hands. Xiao Xiao offered to eat, and if only she knew what was happening on their floor right now. To be honest, Jiang Yu had no idea either, and even if he had, he obviously wouldn't have been open to options on where to go for a bite to eat. As a result, All four of them came to the cafe, which Zhang Yu highly praised. However, as soon as Yao Yao began to read the menu, she immediately realized that she would never follow the boys' lead again in her life. It was the same cafe that students loved, but it looked more like a cafe for guys. As if nothing had happened, Zhang Yu justified himself by saying that he had recently been injured, so he needed to catch up. His order consisted of toast, soy sauce fried rice, egg soup, and this wonderful dish. Yao Yao was very surprised that her friend ordered ordinary dishes. She was sure that he would choose something special, and there was plenty of special on the menu. Slamming his menu, the boy agreed that the set was really too ordinary, so he also ordered bigger and fresher oysters. 15 minutes later, all the dishes were on the teenager's table. They looked quite tasty, so Zhang Yu immediately began to eat. Yao Yao sat dissatisfied, making a face. The guy asked her not to be angry and try, but she just shook her head, categorically refusing. Suddenly, a notification sounded on her phone. It was a letter that stated that the martial arts exam would be held earlier. Testing would begin on the 17th of February and end on the 20th. The special training camp will open on February 25th. The green-haired girl was surprised that she also received this notification. But what surprised her even more was that this exam is mandatory for everyone. The boy sitting next to Zhang Yu was also not happy. All this was so troublesome, considering that they decided to hold the exam ahead of schedule. Zhang Yu decided to comfort his friend by patting him on the shoulder and telling him that his qualifications were not enough. This was a hint of excess weight, but the fat man was not particularly offended about it. At the age of 7, he was very frightened by someone else. By the time he was destroyed, the poor guy had developed a mental illness. Zhang Yu also put in his 2 cents, saying that if he were in his place, he would immediately fight with someone else. Well, he lies and doesn't blush. Yao Yao was not happy with her friend's boasting. Most people would run away in such a situation. After all, not everyone is as dared as Zhang Yu. And even if everything in the world feels normal, others still haven't gone away. They are everywhere. The girl was still a bore who spoiled all the guy's wonderful moments. He looked at her displeasedly, but did not say anything about this. Deciding not to dwell, Zhang Yu hurried to brighten the situation by suggesting a better drink. He even took the glass in his hands and began to say a toast, but that was not destined to be voiced. The sound of a siren was heard, and everyone, as one, jumped out of their seats. It was the pollution sensor siren, so there is another one nearby. Somehow, another entered the shopping center, right into the place where there were hundreds or even thousands of people. General panic began all around. People fled in all directions just to save their own skins. One of the shopping center workers added fuel to the fire, ordering those running away to move faster. People rushed to the exit in a crowd, creating a terrible crush, which made it no longer clear whether they would die from someone else or from the person next to them. The 4 friends simply stood and looked at the crowd, realizing that if they panicked, they would definitely not get out of here alive. Yao Yao asked to remain calm and slowly moved towards the exit, although she herself seemed to be already on the edge. She was distracted from her approaching panic by the sound of falling stones. Zhang Yu swung and simply made a hole in the wall of the building, opening a new escape route. The guy was determined, no matter the cost, to save his friends, especially Yao Yao. Otherwise, Uncle Lu will never forgive him. Waving his hand, the boy began to be indignant at why they were standing rooted to the spot, because it was time to leave, and as soon as possible. While the 2 girls were trying to help the fat man climb to freedom, Zhang Yu began to look around, looking for where the other one had appeared. It didn't take long to search. A man running past indicated his location with his cry. A monster quickly appeared from the portal with razor-sharp arms and a mouth with which it seemed it could swallow its victim whole. Zhang Yu couldn't just transform himself. There were too many people around. Everyone would see it. Unable to think of anything better than to actually run, he grabbed Yao Yao tightly by the wrist and hurriedly moved away from the scene. The guy forcibly made his way through the crowd, thinking only about saving himself. In the meantime, Yao Yao voiced out loud the idea that there should be barriers near the shopping center. Where then would someone else come from here? It was a little late to talk about this, but fortunately, he was discovered more or less on time. The exit was already very close, as if at hand, but something made them stop and freeze in place. The floor beneath them suddenly collapsed, and everyone on top began to fall down. Clouds of dust rose at the crash site, making it impossible to see. Having recovered from the hard landing, Jiang Yu grabbed his own thigh. It was on it that the main impact of the collision fell.
He immediately walked forward, leaning on the concrete slab and asking his friends if they were okay.
The two girls seemed fine, except for dirty clothes and a couple of scratches. So to speak, we were lucky. We escaped with a slight fright. The fat guy was least fortunate. He sat helplessly on the floor while his leg was crushed by a huge stone with several rods sticking out of it. 3 friends quickly rushed to save the poor man. Jiang Yu tried to calm his friend down, asking him not to worry. The guy, gritting his teeth, endured hellish pain while they tried to help him. The boy picked up the stone without any problems, as if it was not a stone at all, but some kind of toy. The fat man's leg looked simply terrible and left no hope of salvation. The fracture was too severe. Jiang Yu threw the stone as far as possible so that suddenly someone would not trip over it. Yao Yao took out a small jar from her pocket and poured a couple of pills into her palm. She handed them to her friend, asking for a drink. They should help and ease the already hellish pain a little. Immediately eating the pills, the fat man began asking questions like, "What is this place?" and "Why has it become so dark here?" Yao Yao could not give answers because she herself had never been in such situations. Jiang Yu, who was not far from the trio all this time, assumed that they were on some floor of the shopping center. "We need to look into it to find out." Putting his hand to the floor, the boy felt a painfully familiar energy. Not believing his own guesses, he straightened up and looked worriedly at his palm. Apparently, the entire floor was dragged into a shadow layer. And this is, oh, how bad it is for everyone here. Screams were heard from everywhere. Someone was under the rubble, asking for help. Someone was reassuring small crying children that soon people from the night watch would come and save them. This whole situation was starting to stress Jiang Yu terribly. There are no means of transportation in the shadow layer, so it would take a long time for the precision patrol to get here. If they stay here for a long time, they will be exposed to a decent amount of pollution, unless, of course, they are caught by others before that. It was necessary to get everyone out of here as quickly as possible. Suddenly, the guy remembered something. Turning to Lu Yao, he asked if she was wearing the watch that Uncle Lu gave her. This reminder was very helpful. The girl immediately remembered them, showing them on her hand. The watch can transmit a signal for help, so people from the night watch will come faster. This calmed the guys down for a while and even lifted their spirits a little, because thanks to Yao Yao, they would definitely be saved. Jiang Yu didn't know how they could speed up the process of the squad's arrival, but the watch was definitely capable of resisting pollution. The other could attack at any moment, so he could not let his guard down. Out of nowhere, that same terrible energy of another began to appear, absorbing everything in its path. People began to panic and scream again, only now there was nowhere to run. And only Jiang Yu remained calm, as if he was only glad that someone else had appeared. He would not be able to harm the others if he fought with the boy. Everything around shook, foreshadowing a new crash. The fat man was ready to cry from hopelessness, and Jiang Yu focused even more on the place where the monster appeared, not having the slightest idea what would happen next. Another escaped from under a pile of stones, rapidly soaring upward. Everything happened so quickly that none of the people could figure out what exactly happened. Yao Yao, as soon as there was a moment of silence, tried to catch her breath. There was devastation all around, and all that was left of the shopping centre were piles of stones. The girl, sitting exhausted on the asphalt, called her friends in the hope of a response. Xiao Xiao appeared first, rushing to her friend to help. Liu responded Yu Qiang, "That poor fat guy." He sat leaning on a stone. Due to the inability to stand up, the guy could not see the two girls desperately trying to find Jiang Yu. Suddenly, the green-haired girl called Yao Yao to look at something. This something turned out to be a huge crack in the ground. Xiao Xiao worriedly suggested that Jiang Yu might have simply fallen into her. This seriously bothered Yao Yao. Not far from them, that grey-haired girl, a fan of Yo, woke up. She, as it turned out, was also in the shopping centre at that moment and came under attack. The girl tried to at least get up, but the pain was unbearable. Having forced herself into a sitting position, she could not understand what had happened. Her tights and dress were hopelessly ruined. The grey-haired girl began to remember that she was running away with her friend, Xiaoya. An alarm sounded, everyone suddenly ran, and then everything was in a fog. The girl worriedly began to call her friend in the hope that everything was okay with her. Unexpectedly, she felt something warm and viscous under her hand. It was blood. The blood of Xiaoya, who died in the fall. Only half of her body remained. The picture that opened before her eyes made the grey-haired woman tremble. Her body treacherously stopped obeying, and tears began to roll down her cheeks. At that moment, another one behind her swung to finish her off. She felt it and turned around, foreshadowing her imminent demise. The monster really looked scary. Just one glance at him was enough to fall into stasis. Thoughts, as one, began to flash through her head. The girl would never have thought that she would end up in the plot of one of the horror films. And besides, the hero of the film always comes to save the heroine at this time. This is impossible in real life. No one will save her because in reality there are no heroes. The white-haired woman was fully prepared to face death, closing her eyes, but she still felt alive. At that moment, the sound of a collision was heard. Opening her eyes, she saw a dark silhouette in front of her, clearly reminiscent of something familiar. Wiping away her tears, the girl tried to take a closer look. In front of her stood the same hero who saved the princess from a terrible death. This hero was Jiang Yu, who took the form of a shadow. He held the other's hand without any problems, not allowing him to even move. As soon as the boy let go of the sharp claw, the monster hurried away. Taking this opportunity, the girl turned to her savior, trying to remember his name. Jiang Yu managed to discover a new skill, Shadow Claw, which works together with the killer ability, increasing the lethality of blows. And all this in front of the girl's eyes. Without paying proper attention to her, the guy teleported to someone else, who managed to manifest himself in another place. Once above the monster, Jiang Yu swung both claw hands at him, intending to finish him off with one blow. However, the force was not yet enough for such an action, and the other only flew a few meters back. He had to slow down with his claw so as not to fly further. When he straightened up, the other could be seen in all its glory, terrible and deadly. True, this did not bother the girl one bit. All her attention was focused on Yu, whose name she finally remembered. Rising to her feet, the grey-haired woman exclaimed in admiration, attracting the guy's attention to her. As if having forgotten about what was happening around, the girl rushed to her idol, declaring herself his most devoted fan. The boy was even a little embarrassed by this amount of attention. Therefore, I tried to draw attention to other people's tights and dress, saying that they were torn. The grey-haired woman feigned embarrassment, demonstrating herself as not being easily accessible, but the guy simply reminded her of such a thing, without any subtext. The girl decided not to waste the opportunity and used her feminine charms, declaring that if you didn't like it, she could run home and change into new clothes. Well, they are guys even in Africa. Jiang Yu was openly embarrassed, swallowing hard. He couldn't believe what he heard, but the fan assured the boy that she would do everything for him. Someone else, observing everything from the outside, could not even understand a little of what was happening here. Deciding to remind of his, as it were, presence, he let out a heartbreaking roar. This seemed to bring the hunter back to reality, and he immediately returned to his original goal, to protect people. Having concentrated all his strength, Jiang Yu was ready to do anything if only this hunt would end successfully, and in the end, he would receive the promised reward. From the grey-haired one, of course. Using teleportation, he disappeared from the other's field of vision. He didn't understand where his prey had disappeared, so he looked around. Suddenly, he felt a strange touch on the back of his head. These were the hunter's threads wrapped around his neck. Jiang Yu pulled them and made the monster fly into the air, after which he immediately rushed after him, trying to strike, but he missed. Having landed on the asphalt, the guy heard someone else fall not far from him. Of course, he has a lot of strength and dexterity, otherwise the monster would already be dead. Jiang Yu was not going to give up, so he quickly rushed to attack again. Not even halfway there, he felt something was wrong. The blows of enemy claws from both sides forced him to stop. Trying to catch his breath, the boy looked around. In addition to one other, next to him there were two more of the same kind. This will present many problems, but he will still try to fight them. The support group, oddly enough, was the same fan, cheering Yu on from afar and reminding him that if he wins, she will put on stockings for him. The girl also filmed everything that happened on camera. Jiang Yu instantly blushed and became even more eager to kick others' ass. And all for the sake of stockings. The boy rushed into battle full of determination and self-confidence. He was even able to dodge the monster's powerful attack by jumping over it. But the monster was not so simple. It immediately soared into the air, swinging for a new attack. Without being confused, the hunter used threads, pointing them straight at the hands of others. They tightly bound them, not allowing them to move. Jiang Yu himself was a little surprised at his own power. However, he is full of praise. You can't praise yourself, no one will praise you. Having lost his vigilance for just a couple of seconds, the hunter found himself attacked from behind, but in a different way. The blow was so powerful that the boy coughed up blood, losing some of it. The battle was beginning to take an interesting turn. Jumping away from the other, the hunter decided to change his location and take a more advantageous position in order to come up with a new plan for attack. Others began to work together. Two hold back while one attacks. Not bad considering it's 3 for 1. If this continues, there will certainly be no chance of winning. We had to come up with something as soon as possible. Having released the threads at one of the others, the boy did not expect that he would notice them and dodge so deftly. Momentarily confused, Jiang Yu tried to change his plan of action, but it was already a little too late. 3 monsters rushed towards him at the same moment. One attacked from the right, another from the left, the third from above. Fighting off everyone at once was an unrealistic task.
The hunter had to parry many attacks per second, which is why he was unable to go into the shadows.
His blood level dropped rapidly with each blow. 89, 78, 60, 45. There seemed to be no end to them, but it was no longer possible to continue in the same spirit. Others, like a flock, circled over their prey, not giving a head start. Then it dawned on Jiang Yu that the enemies needed to be lured somewhere. But how to do this is another question. Another, attacking from behind, struck the hunter on the back, instantly reducing his blood percentage to 35. At the same moment, the boy activated the tag, announcing the start of the chase. Since his last battle, the duration of the mark was extended by 3 seconds. During this time, the chosen target will no longer think clearly due to fear. At the 8th millisecond, the guy focused on one of the others. On the 10th, he prepared to attack, ignoring 2 attackers from behind. On the 12th, the hunter used threads, shackling his enemy. On the 22nd, he struck with crushing force, so much so that the monster's blood percentage immediately dropped to 7. On the 26th, the boy found a vulnerability inside another and extended his clawed hand to it, intending to destroy it. On the 30th, Jiang Yu used decapitation, melting into the monster once and for all. At the end of the wait, a hologram appeared in front of him, containing the following information. The chase was a success. The shape of the shadow becomes more powerful. When using this ability, the consumption of shadow glasses is reduced, since in the shadow layer, the shadow absorbs the atmosphere. The speed of experience recovery and gaining shadow points also increases. Taking a breath, the hunter used recovery, replenishing his blood bar a little. Now, dealing with 2 others instead of 3 was several times easier. It was their turn to attack, and Jiang Yu would be able to fight back. The monsters were as angry as ever. They literally wanted to tear the enemy to shreds. But they didn't attack. The boy was exponentially recovering his health, and his blood bar was rapidly growing upward. Not believing his own eyes, he mockingly asked what happened that they didn't continue. Having never received an answer, because most of the others do not know how to talk, the guy decided to make the first move himself, rushing at great speed towards one of the monsters. Unexpectedly for everyone, like the hunter, like others, a bright and blinding light came from the side. He made Jiang Yu stop in confusion. The guy couldn't understand where the light came from in the shadow layer. What was also strange was the fact that the hunter suddenly wanted to go to him, given that he needed to hide in the shadows. Unlike the boys, others could not restrain themselves, immediately rushing into this light like bees to honey. It was clear from their appearance that they were completely distraught, as if someone was controlling them. The source of the light was the commander of the night watch, Song Chingen. In his palm was an ever-burning torch that, once used, emits a soft glow that dispels shadows. It can also be used as a light source. A green light began to glow in the young commander's second palm, and its rays were directed at others, and on Jiang Yu, who continued to stand motionless. Realizing at the moment that they could kill him now, the guy shouted that he was one of his own, and there was no need to touch him at all. One of the others, who was flying towards the flames, was already very close, right behind the commander. The green rays, previously aimed at the hunter, abruptly enveloped the monster's body, causing it to literally explode and leave nothing behind. Jiang Yu was delighted with what he saw. It was in such actions that the strength of the night watch lay. But if he hit the guy, he would probably disappear at that very second. The boy approached one of the patrol workers and thanked them for coming on time like never before. Any more, and he would have lost. The man in dark glasses apologized for the delay and asked if everything was okay. The hunter said that he was not so important, and it was better to worry about that girl with the torn tights. The grey-haired girl was surprised by this decision because you promised to return her home. Jiang Yu admitted that it was all a joke and the night watch people always put work first. Leaving the girl on night watch, the boy said goodbye to everyone and fell through the ground, leaving people in confusion. The commander and his subordinate did not know who or what kind of person this was. The man with glasses said that this Yo, the host, is very famous on his platform, uses a shadow form but is not particularly strong, probably located somewhere on the first level. This information seemed very dubious and strange to the commander because he had a torch in his hand. Where could the shadows come from here? And the guy disappeared in front of so many people? It looks like he was far from level 1. In any case, now it was more important to return home the girl who was hysterical and crying, out of disappointment in her idol and the fact that he just abandoned her on some kind of night watch. This, Song Chingen will check later. Personally, stepping over mountains of corpses, Yao Yao tried to find her friend, already imagining all sorts of good and bad scenarios of what could happen to him. With a flashlight built into the clock, she illuminated almost every corpse, trying to find any clues. In principle, being here was terribly unpleasant for her. At some point, the girl despaired and her voice trembled when she aimed the light from the lantern at another lifeless body. However, her fears dissipated in an instant as soon as she heard Jiang Yu's voice. He was literally a few meters away from her, extending his hand and asking for help. The boy was literally crushed under a pile of stones and screamed that he felt like he was going to be torn apart. Yao Yo rushed to save the poor man, clearing away the stones and asking him to be patient for a while. But the guy still wouldn't let up, declaring that he couldn't stand much more. The girl frankly didn't understand how he got here in the first place. When the stones were dismantled and Jiang Yu stood up, Yao Yao suspected something was wrong. Pointing her finger at the pile of stones with which the boy was allegedly crushed, she stated that they did not put pressure on him at all. The guy, as always, turned it all into a joke. It seems that he really could have gotten out on his own, he just couldn't move. Noticing a huge wound on the boy's back, the girl hesitantly asked where it came from. He said it was from a stone, although in reality, otherwise, he will simply never talk about it. Changing the subject, he asked where Xiao Xiao and Lu Yuqiang were now. Yao Yu exhaled and replied that the night watch came to the rescue, so they were taken away and are now safe. But Jiang Yu was surprised by the fact that his friend stayed behind to find him. If something happened to him, the girl would not be able to look Uncle Li in the eyes. Yao Yao terribly, and the boy noticed this with the naked eye. Only a fool would not notice the obvious. Tears gathered at the corners of his eyes. The guy was pleased that she cared so much about him. And even in such a situation, he sacrifices himself. The guy rushed into his arms, literally squeezing her in his arms as tightly as he could. Something treacherously trembled inside Yao Yao. There was no denying the fact that she enjoyed the hug. But also accept the fact that this impudent person allows himself too much without permission. Jiang Yu babbled something about others, pressing his cheek to the girl's chest, while their owner tried to pull the guy away from her. The boy's grip was stronger than any steel, so Yao Yao had no choice but to throw empty threats in his ear while he was content with what he was so kindly given. The only thing that could tear him away from pleasure was a ray of light that appeared out of nowhere, aimed directly at the two of them. The source was a lantern, and it was held by some unfamiliar woman who came in response to the screams. She was checking the area and came across these two. How nice! Yao Yao immediately pushed Zhang Yu away, declaring that everything was normal and there was nothing to worry about. The stranger thought it was cute, but didn't say anything about it, only notified that she would lead the guys to the exit. They were about to leave when the boy made an incomprehensible sound of despair, to which even his friend turned around, not understanding what was wrong. Having assured her that everything is fine, the guy is mentally ready to cry because he completely forgot to absorb the others. Shadow glasses. He lost his precious shadow glasses. After everything that happened, on the same day, all the victims were called to the headquarters of the Night Watch. Each person was interrogated separately. Now, in a small room illuminated by only a few lamps, Zhang Yu was sitting. There were handcuffs on the table, just in case. The boy was asked his name. Next, they asked his age, to which he answered, 18 years. Absolutely all interrogations were recorded on a tape recorder, and the conversation with Zhang Yu was no exception. The question about age was followed by a question about admission. The girl asking the questions was dressed too revealingly. The guy's gaze was riveted on her chest, so he managed to ignore half of the words. As it turned out, the consequences of the incident are not so great, but they are there. Some required psychological help. The duration of treatment will be about a month. Li Yuan, that was the girl's name, explained that if you take a martial arts test during this period, your final grade will be lowered. This turn of events did not suit Zhang Yu. He stated that everything was fine with him and there was no need for therapy. However, the contamination process can occur covertly and sometimes it is too late to do anything. So treatment is mandatory. Then it turns out that the guy has about 10 days before the exam. Somehow, not enough. Li Yuan reassured the boy by telling him that many similar situations had happened in past years, so the Night Watch had developed a special policy in this regard. Interested persons may submit an application in advance. The girl put a form on the table that will need to be filled out. First of all, you need to contact your parents so that they sign everything. Preliminary testing is carried out during night patrols, and the results are also entered into the system. Everything is just like an exam. The testing equipment is also exactly the same, open and impartial. The Night Watch will guarantee safety in case of unforeseen situations. All this, of course, is impressive, but Zhang Yu hastened to interrupt the girl, saying that his uncle also works on the Night Watch. In this case, this simplified the task many times over. She asked to tell her uncle's name. He works in the main department of the 1st District, is a civilian, and his name is Li Sungguang. Hearing this name, Li Yuan shuddered and became seriously worried. She jumped up from her seat, rushing at the person being interrogated, asking the name of his uncle several times to make sure that she had not misheard. After making sure that all this was true, the girl asked another question. Is Zhang Yu sure that the man is an ordinary civilian? The boy did not quite understand such excitement and surprise on the part of the investigator, which is why he himself became nervous, asking whether his uncle had been fired by accident. Pulling away, Li Yuan calmed down a little, saying that everything was fine and nothing had happened. Taking a folder with papers from the table, she invited Zhang Yu to go with her, saying that she herself would take him to his uncle. The guy silently followed the girl. This was the first time he had walked around the Night Watch headquarters so freely. The building looked unusual, which caused genuine delight in the boy. 2 patrol workers passed by them and Zhang Yu inadvertently overheard their conversation. They were talking about Yu, that after many checks, they did not see such a person with that name. The guy realized that things were not taking the best turn. Turning around, Li Wen noticed the excitement on the boy's face, wondering what was the matter. He naturally lied, saying that it was nothing. It was just his first time here. So he was a little worried. In fact, a problem arose. The Night Watch began to check him. The investigator asked not to worry and to rest a little while she herself went to see Inspector Li. Jiang Yu walked into the office, where his friends had already gathered, Lu Yao Yao and Feng Xiao Xiao. The girls sat opposite each other, and while the second one simply hung her head, the first one could not believe that some other girl managed to see that very yo with her own eyes. The grey-haired woman did not lie about this, saying that in addition to all this, he also saved her. Jiang Yu clearly didn't expect to see someone here. Watching their conversation from the side, the boy did not understand why the girl he saved was also here, and even more so why she was so willing to talk with Yao Yao. Scratching the back of his head, the guy hesitantly walked further. The friend drew attention to him, telling him to sit next to him, and then returned all her attention to the grey-haired woman, asking him to continue the story about Yu. The girl enthusiastically began to tell how she saw Yu fight with 10 others at once. He looked very calm and relaxed, so he killed everyone in an instant. Just at the moment when others could no longer move, the night watch arrived. Brother Yuri. Yu, as she calls him in most cases, disappeared into the shadows, leaving his laurels to the workers. Jiang Yu, listening to this, mentally asked not to add fuel to the fire, but his gaze fell on someone else's legs and stockings. They were so beautiful. This was his biggest weakness at the moment. Yao Yao, after analysing the story, asked if the girl knew who Yutachi really was. They say that he is not a member of the Night Watch. The grey-haired girl assumed that he was a student like all of them. Yao Yao asked why she made such conclusions. The girl argued everything by saying that his words and actions, as well as her intuition, spoke about this. Most importantly, he is simply in love with a girl's legs, especially if they are not a cover, just like hers. Overall, he was like Jiang Yu, whom she pointed at the next moment after noticing his gaze. The boy did not immediately understand what he had to do with it, and Yao Yao attacked him with her fists, grabbing him by the hair. Oh, this is a peculiar manifestation of jealousy. Fortunately, they were saved from the fight by Uncle Lu, who suddenly burst into the office and rushed here as hard as he could. Looking out of breath, the man immediately turned to his daughter, asking if she was okay. He was very concerned about the information that she had entered the shadow layer. Yao Yao assured her father that she was fine, and even more so with Jiang Yu. The boy added that he was just a little hungry. Having made sure that everything was really fine, Lu calmed down and invited the guys to come along with him. All three went into a separate office, where they sat down at the table for a serious conversation. Yao Yao asked worriedly if the situation was serious this time, to which I received a positive response. After all, this is the first time that an entire store fell into the shadow layer. The victims are still being counted. The man also mentioned that because of this incident, the test for them will be conducted earlier. Lu was about to light a cigarette, but his daughter's disapproving glance stopped him from such an adventure. I didn't really want to. Having placed it on the table, the man decided to briefly tell about everything. The test is divided into 2 parts. First, ability testing. Second, test of willpower. The testing of abilities is known as the initial awakening. Candidates will resist pollution. In this test, the risks are quite low. Mainly the distribution of abilities is based on characteristics. The subject of the willpower test will be their spiritual will. This test will be the key to whether they can become special. The key to success is willpower. That is, the stronger, the better. This is what Jiang Yu assumed based on the explanation, but Uncle Lu interrupted him, saying that this was not necessary. Some people can endure the pain of even a severed arm, but their skills will remain mediocre. Others do nothing but play the fool, but at the same time show their best side. Willpower lies not only in the ability to endure pain, but also in faith in goodness, resistance to evil thoughts, tolerance for pollution. In general terms, everything is quite complicated. The boy asked whether these points affect willpower. Lu didn't quite understand why such a question was asked in the first place. Yao Yao put in her 2 cents sarcastically and said that someone's thoughts are occupied with girls' legs. At this moment, Jiang Yu realized that his friend was still angry with him. Without paying due attention to the teenager's words, the man answered the guy's question. There are several other factors, but these 3 points are the most common. And if these same 3 points are somehow distorted and the heart is filled with negative emotions, then everything will go down the drain. Jiang Yu sincerely didn't understand why. The whole point is that evil thoughts will attract only evil. Negative emotions are also a kind of environmental pollution. And if all this accumulates over a long period of time, then the pollution will eventually become immense. So, if there are any negative emotions right now, it's time to release them. If the guys keep them in their hearts, it won't lead to anything good in the end. Jiang Yu thought about this, remembering both girls. And yet I made my choice towards the legs. You need to go and massage them to cleanse your soul. At this point, the conversation was over, and Uncle Lou asked the guys to return to their places. Testing should begin after some time. Turning to Jiang Yu, the man clarified that Uncle Lee would probably not return soon, so he signed all the documents in his place. The boy apologized for the inconvenience. Lou just nodded his head, asking the teenagers not to worry about everything and just go with the flow. Still, the man was a very pleasant person. The guys promised him that everything would be like this. Although each of them perceived the information received differently, some took it for granted, while others were upset. Upon their return, both were greeted by that grey-haired girl. She sat alone at the table and was very glad that now she would have company. Jiang Yu was relaxed, walking and stretching at the same time, unlike his friend. Su Yao Yao sat on the chair next to the girl, asking where everyone else had gone. As it turned out, they left along with the workers. The grey-haired one didn't leave because her parents hadn't signed the papers yet. They are doing business, just left the city a couple of days ago and have not returned yet, so the signing will be done remotely. Suddenly the door opened and all three turned their heads. Xiao Xiao and the fat man entered the office. More precisely, the girl carried him in a wheelchair because the guy's leg was broken. But that's not to say that he looked upset. He boasted that they sprayed some product on his leg and it stopped hurting. Jiang Yu was surprised that his friend wanted to take the test. Yao Yao was also not happy. But the guy assured the guys not to worry. The investigator said that his injury would not affect the results in any way. Xiao Xiao began to gloat, telling her friends not to look at his confident face because he was literally just crying in the corner. The fat man was extremely outraged by such frankness, but the boy could not do anything. It was all just jokes. At some point, another door opened, and this attracted Jiang Yu's attention more. The same teenagers began to emerge from there, only their faces expressed complete grief. Some were ready to cry, while others simply walked with their heads hanging. Jiang Yu asked his friends why those guys looked so depressed. Yao Yao said that he would never understand them. They just want to live a peaceful life. However, after the test, most likely, they will begin to experience obvious changes. The investigator, going to the center so that everyone could see and hear her, asked to pay attention to her. It seems they will now be given a full briefing before testing. After waiting for complete silence, the girl opened the folder with papers and began to explain. The testing is divided into two parts: testing abilities and willpower. The ability test will be assessed in terms of their development potential, destructive power, and ability to use it. Abilities are divided into low, medium, high, and highest. Willpower testing is aimed at identifying resistance to pollution. The following colors will be awarded: white, green, blue, purple, red, and orange. In previous years, Level 1 abilities were not allowed to take part in the challenge, but this year, everyone must participate without exception. Moreover, the assessment of opportunities to become special must be taken into account at all stages of strength development. With sufficient willpower, the guys will have the ability to counterattack. But if their willpower is inferior to their abilities, they can only become civilian workers. At this point, the girl slammed the folder shut with a peculiar sound and asked everyone to follow her. Everyone was moved to the waiting room. The waiting room was separated from the next room by a glass wall, which was almost impossible to break through. Jiang Yu's attention was drawn to what was behind her. There was a worker standing in the testing room, and next to him was an incomprehensible pile of something, covered with a huge brown cloth with a yellow pattern. A voice came from the loudspeaker inviting Feng Xiaoxiao to take the test. The girl was suddenly frightened, but she still walked to the entrance to the room, stopping right in front of the door. She was asked not to worry and just move on. Looking at her friends out of the corner of her eye, she noticed confidence in her abilities on their faces. It gave me courage. Taking a deep breath and exhaling, the girl clenched her palms into fists and moved towards the unknown. In the room, as predicted earlier, the worker conducting the test was waiting for her. The guys who remained in the waiting room came closer to the glass wall in order to better see what would happen next. The fabric, which had previously hidden an unknown object, suddenly turned out to be torn off. And this object turned out to be a stone? A huge stone is transparent, emitting an incomprehensible energy. This was the first test of willpower. The bespectacled man controlling him said she could start. Green light, previously burning green, suddenly turned red and the lights around went out. Some began to protest whether it was necessary to turn off the electricity. And those who stood closest to the wall could not see what was happening in the next room. Jiang Yu was not at all bothered by these rules. He had already gotten used to the darkness in the shadow layer. Xiao Xiao's leg, but it was smaller. After passing the test, he determined the rank of the person being tested. Her eyes were also covered with a blindfold. This is also part of the test. It seems that the girl encountered something strong. I wonder if she will succeed. At that moment, a blinding spotlight turned on, signaling that the test was over. Back in the waiting room, Xiao Xiao looked not exactly upset. Yao Yao immediately ran up to her friend, wondering how everything went. Unfortunately, she did not have the talent for willpower. She had trained before, but it was all to no avail. The fat man was indignant because Xiao Xiao didn't tell anyone that she wanted to become special, and even more so, she didn't tell anyone about her training. Either way, it didn't work out for her. What difference does it make now? The next name to come out of the loudspeaker was Liu Yuqiang. The guy in the wheelchair didn't want to become special in any way. His friend tried to console him, telling him not to worry, he definitely wouldn't be able to become one. The test took place in the same order. The light turned off, and then he turned on. Fatty looked stunned as he walked out of the testing room. And Xiao Xiao was no less stunned by what she heard. She couldn't imagine anyone, let alone Liu Yuqiang, being special. What an irony. The girl wanted it, but it didn't work out, and the fat guy didn't want it, but he did it. Yao Yao tried to calm the guys down, saying that they were both just unlucky. The next person in line for the test was Lu Yao Yao, so it was not possible to talk with them longer. The girl exhaled heavily, mentally preparing herself for what awaited her outside the door. Looking over her shoulder at Jiang Yu, she smiled at him, showing with all her appearance that no matter what, the girl would pass the test. During the test, the light around Yao Yao turned red. Like the stone attached to her foot, the color red denoted rank. Jiang Yu noticed that others had the stone glowing green. The friend was the first whose stone lit up red. Willpower corresponds to 6 different ranks, and the rank that Yao Yao received was 5th, that is, the maximum. When the girl finished the test and left the room, she looked very worried, despite the fact that she had passed it. Jiang Yu was, as always, in his repertoire. He laughed because his friend was tired, that it was hard for her to even breathe. Yao Yao suggested that he go there himself, and then he would understand what it was like. But the boy came at her with kisses, complaining that instead of reproaches, she could somehow motivate him. The girl didn't like this, and she tried to push the insolent man away. Imagine her happiness when the loudspeaker announced the name of the next person being tested, Jiang Yusu. The guy immediately let go of his friend and ran to the door, happily waving goodbye to her. Yao Yao couldn't stay angry with the guy for long. She has such a kind soul. Confused by her own thoughts, she wished him luck. He will definitely succeed. Jiang Yu was no less embarrassed and thanked his friend. Then he went inside the testing room. The door immediately closed behind him. He approached the employee asking for his name. He handed him his questionnaire and a flask with an unknown liquid, at the same time wondering whether the boy had awakened his ability. The answer was positive, but it seems that the man was so focused on something else that he did not immediately pay attention to this, telling him to drink the contents of the flask. Unfortunately, or fortunately, Jiang Yu managed to drink the liquid before the man realized it. In any case, the man was not going to question the subject about it. Pointing to the accessories, he simply asked to begin testing the strength of the oxen. Having put on everything as expected, the guy stood in the middle of the room, focusing on his own feelings. He felt some tension, suddenly changing his mind about going forward. In order to calm the boy down, the examiner squeezed the other's shoulders with both hands and asked him not to be nervous, just trust himself and move on. Since Zhang Yu's abilities have awakened, he will feel his consciousness being separated from his body as he moves forward. Pushing the guy, this time the man asked him to act in a more commanding tone. The boy almost fell forward, managing to maintain his balance in time. From a strange sensation, beads of sweat appeared on my face and basically all over my body. Suddenly, Zhang Yu felt himself rapidly falling down. It's as if an unknown force is dragging the poor guy along. This feeling was short-lived, but very noticeable and impactful on the mental state. Having landed on the water, the boy did not understand what was happening, frantically looking around. Looking at his hands, he realized that he could not feel his body. It was amazing. However, Zhang Yu was still directly connected to him. He tried to take a step forward. The boy could literally walk on water like some kind of deity. It was so cool and funny that the guy couldn't hide his admiration. But the examiner was not very pleased with this reaction. A strange guy, however, got caught. The man informed the subject that if he continued jumping, the test would be terminated. This instantly calmed the boy, forcing him to concentrate on the task. Zhang Yu saw in front of him that same huge, transparent stone emitting light. So I hurried to him. Surprisingly, it was so easy that it aroused suspicion. With every step, the body became heavier and breathing became more and more difficult. Something began to influence him, and the boy began to quickly go under the water. Drowning. He was drowning. In an instant, the guy felt a spectrum of negative emotions. Despair, sadness, anger. The list of them could be endless. But Zhang Yu had to resist and not give in to them under any circumstances. Suddenly, Uncle Li's voice came from behind him, appearing out of nowhere. This was alarming. Turning around, the boy could not understand how he ended up here. The man began to say that the guy was not special at all. He will only hurt others if he continues the test. Zhang Yu realized that this was an illusion and not the real Uncle Li. Therefore, I hurried away from him, trying to escape the trap of my own fears. Everything was not so simple. Another illusion appeared in front of the boy, saying the same thing. The guy was not capable enough to become special. Illusions surrounded the poor fellow, and they all repeated as one. Mountains and rivers were destroyed, others were rampaging everywhere. The guy himself should understand this. He can live a happy life, so why bother with such nonsense? Being special is not about strength, but about will. All illusions turned around in an instant, pointing to something. In the distance, one could see a battle between a huge other and a bunch of special ones from the night watch. Illusions asked, could Zhang Yu follow their example? Another had terrifying strength and size. He literally destroyed everything in his path, leaving no trace of a living creature. The guy couldn't do anything about it. He just watched from the side, realizing that this was the same illusion trying to piss him off. People's body parts were scattered everywhere. Is this really the outcome of events that he ultimately wants for himself? Everything that was happening began to seriously affect the boy's mental state. It seemed that just a little more and he would give up. In an instant, this horror stopped and the sound of a lighter clicking was heard. Zhang Yu felt immediate relief. Uncle Li, standing nearby, explained that this is the end of the special ones. Having lit a cigar, he asked if the boy really wanted to be like them. The illusion asked not to deceive either itself or anyone else. After all, in reality, the guy just wants to be the center of attention. Exactly. This is how his own fears pressed on him, forcing him to cave in and give up. Likewise, countless teenagers dream of becoming superheroes. Staying in bed, no early rises, fun, female love. Illusions with each of their phrases increased the pressure on Zhang Yu. I don't like it when elders try to speak their teeth. I am a person who has my own thoughts and goals. I feel like I'm meant for something more. I feel different from others. I like to be assertive, strive for more. I don't have many abilities, but I crave a lot of things. In fact, Zhang Yu himself understands that there is nothing special about him. All this is just youthful maximalism. He understands because the dark side of this world is by no means a shadow layer. Even if there is a bright, scorching sun above his head, there will always be something that he cannot see. This will be the hidden world. The guy was already sitting on his knees, struggling with his own contradictions inside. The illusions pressed on him as hard as they could. It was unbearable. There is nothing beautiful in the hidden world. It is not a fairy tale or fiction. The illusion of the guy he met in the shadow world dissipated, leaving behind a torch that went out as soon as he fell and came into contact with the water. But a new one appeared. Others, everyone he met and killed. If he becomes special, the boy will have to reap the fruits of his decisions. Jiang Yu looked at the changing illusions like a movie playing before his eyes. But one thing remained unchanged. Li. He asked the question again. Can the guy become special, given all the risks? The boy got angry, no longer having the desire to listen to this nonsense arising in his head. Meanwhile, quite a lot of time has passed in the real world. Jiang Yu was the first to take the test for so long. The examiner stood with his arms crossed over his chest. Another night watch worker, the one who saved the guys from the shadow layer, entered the room, wondering how everything was going. The man said that nothing really happened. The boy just beats around the bush without producing any results. The girl said that this was normal. After all, the pollution that Jiang Yu inherited was not something everyone could bear, but only people with high resilience can advance. The boy rushed from side to side. There seemed to be a great struggle going on within him. The guy's goals were not so clear to the night watch. The girl was about to leave, since nothing interesting was happening, when suddenly, the stone attached to Jiang Yu's leg turned red. The examiner was shocked because he hoped to escort the boy out of the testing room as soon as he completed the task. However, the guy was not going to just give up. The man could not believe what was happening. There must be something wrong with the stone. Jiang Yu must be rank 5, but it didn't look like much. The girl grabbed her colleague's shoulder, enthusiastically saying that this must be the 6th rank. This assumption was dubious. After all, for several decades, only a few people had reached rank 6. The stone on the boy's foot continued to shine. He, having gathered all his strength together, continued to move forward, intending to finish what he started. The examiner could not understand what was happening. The light began to fade. The man asked to quickly check the guy's watch for any abnormalities. All indicators were normal. What was happening seemed impossible. The closer you get to the huge stone, the more powerful your willpower. But Jiang Yu's willpower, on the contrary, was weakening. The boy, being a couple of meters from the stone, extended his hand to it. Just a little more and he will touch it. Those present were seriously tense, expecting any outcome of events. The examiner considered this to be some kind of failed joke. Even a person with rank 6 willpower was not capable of such a thing. The light around the stone suddenly changed to yellow, blinding everything around. The boy was able to touch him. Still, he turned out to be capable. Jiang Yu was still fighting inside himself. The illusions kept telling him that he shouldn't become special. It's better to let him think about his friends whom he adores so much, about a dear person whom he loves so much. Illusion Yao Yao extended her hand to the guy, beckoning him to come to her. Jiang Yu was tempted to touch her. He needed to make a choice. Now, the boy suddenly came to his senses and his mind became clear. He was stronger than all this. Enough! It was necessary to end the fight and make the last decision. Yu made the obsessive illusion disappear. It was cracking terribly in my ears. For a moment he even thought, this is definitely some kind of temptation. Maybe it's time to give in to him? Returning to where it all began, the guy headed to the fake Uncle Li. Spreading his arms, the boy admitted that at the beginning he had taken him by surprise, which made him even think about it. Indeed, Jiang Yu originally only wanted to look like a hero to others, and he didn't care much about the rest. But there were no supermen in this world, only ordinary people who were able to achieve success. The illusion of that same guy with a torch reappeared nearby. It was the dedication of such people to their work that brought the world into stability. Jiang Yu extended his hand to him, admitting that he had already enjoyed peace once before.
Grabbing the torch, the guy carefully took it for himself.
Then he pointedly raised it up. Everything around was illuminated with a bright fiery light. Jiang Yu no longer wanted to hide behind others. He wants to light his own flame and light up the darkness.
Not far from where the first test took place, workers were sitting in offices studying the recent incident. Among them was Uncle Lou.
The shadow layer affected the second, third and fourth floors of the shopping centre. The fifth floor, although not completely, was also damaged. About 850 people were drawn in, of whom 700 were trapped. More than 650 have been rescued, but the search is still ongoing. 30 students take part in the exam. Several groups have been selected to be tested for contamination. Lou asked for a report from the pollution department to be sent to him. Having received it instantly, the man began to study the material. Shadow species, code name, wandering spirit, pollution level, first. The three spirits are very similar in terms of morphology, bones and tissues. Traces of human product were also found at the scene. This was impossible because everyone has their own individual traits, and during mutation, they change greatly. And these traits cannot be distributed immediately between three others. The situation was getting more and more strange. In order to clear his mind of obsessive thoughts, Lou decided to smoke.